Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order for the Brawley City Council successor agency, the Brawley Community Redevelopment Agency. Special meeting agenda for Tuesday, November 20th at 3 p.m. We can have the roll call, please.
The minutes will reflect all council members present.
Thank you. The invocation by Council Member Sam Couchman. Please rise.
Heavenly Father, we ask you to bless this meeting, bless the council, give us wisdom in our decisions, bless all our troops overseas, and all the troops that are now serving at the border. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Councilmember Hamby, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second. Any discussion? Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 2, public appearances and comments, not to exceed 4 minutes. This is a time for the public to address the council on any item not appearing on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city council. The mayor will recognize you, and when you come to the microphone, please state your name for the record. You are not allowed to make personal attacks or on individuals or make comments that are slanderous or which may invade an individual's personal privacy. Please direct your questions and comments to the city council. Is there anyone here who would like to make a public comment? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on. We're going to move on to item 3, and that's the consent agenda. Items are approved by one motion. Council members or members of the public may request consent items be considered separately at a time determined by the mayor. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as written?
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion? Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So we're moving on to regular business. It's item 4A, discussion potential action to adopt resolution number 2018- resolution of the City Council of the City of Brawley, California, approving the overall budget for fiscal year 2018-2019 and authorizing an exception to the city's general fund reserve preservation policy. Backup materials on pages 46 through 47, and that will be presented by our city manager.
Yes, Mayor Nava and Council, good afternoon. I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation. The greatest detail can be found in a memorandum. There are plenty of copies available for the public here, and we also have our published worksheets that are available as well. If I may, I would like to present a number of overview slides and then take a little bit of time to review in total some of the proposed changes affecting the general fund.
Please do. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so it has been a long time coming, and want to first begin by expressing thanks on the part of executive staff for your patience with working through a number of major staff transitions that have delayed the preparation of our overall budget. And so today, presented for action is a proposed budget that takes into account all of the city's funds. And the content aims to reflect the ground that has been covered in a number of public workshops involving both our council and community. Okay, so we had 4 meetings that were held to discuss various elements of the overall budget for 18-19. We began with a strategic planning session. We honed in on the general fund. We took a look at enterprise and special funds, and then we did a revisit of the general fund and maintenance fund just at our last meeting in November. And the direction provided at that time was for staff to move forward with document preparation and alternatives for the council's consideration. With the end goal of a budget being adopted today and in place, a number of assumptions were made, and I would like to be sure that I take the time needed to explain to council as to what is built into the model and what alternatives, if that is the council's wish, to go in a different direction than what is proposed, that we're here today as staff to receive that feedback. What is presented to you this afternoon is a balanced budget. And so that is no easy feat to accomplish in challenging economic times. So I want to begin with kind of a very big picture view. There's over a dozen funds. As you know, many of those funds have highly specified purposes, and the general fund is the fund that is most flexible in its assignment for use. From a fiscal year point of view, all funds, our revenues represent just shy of $45 million. We have approximately $12 million in capital projects that are a part of an expenditure plan that comprises about $48 million. At the end of the fiscal year, June 30, 2019, it is estimated overall, all funds, that will have an ending balance of approximately $36 million. So kind of easy to think when you look at these big numbers and all of the dollars associated with it that we must have a great deal of flexibility. But the truth of the matter is the general fund, which funds many of our most critical public services, the value of those dollars are much smaller when compared to the dollar values associated, for instance, with water and sewer enterprise. So my hope for today, given the state of the general fund, is really to focus in on and take a deep dive into the general fund. Council recently had the opportunity to review our 16-17 fiscal year audit results. And based on that ending balance and what we have booked through June 30, 2018, as revenues received or expenditures incurred, we have a beginning balance for July 1 of 2018 as of $1.7 million. Okay, so in July, we started with this value, and based on the revenue projections presented to council at the last meeting, we anticipate receiving approximately $15 million in general fund revenues. The proposed budget includes a capital improvement plan of a modest $53,000 in general fund dollars. Overall, the expenditures represent just shy of $15 million, and we show an ending balance of $1.7 million. Part of the backup in today's budget action is the resolution that would adopt the proposed budget for 18-19. Included in that document is what is proposed as an exception to the general fund reserve preservation policy. Per City Council policy, the city aims to set aside 15% of operational expenditures every year as a rainy day fund. This year, despite some pretty significant cuts that I will soon detail, we were unable, with the proposal presented, to meet the 15% target. Instead, what is proposed is an exception that would reduce the 15% set aside to 11.7. And I'll go into a little bit more detail as to how much this really translates to in dollars. Okay, so what I'd next like to do is turn to the memorandum that has been prepared for the council's action tonight. At our last meeting in November, we referred to a $900,000 to $1 million gap between operational revenues and expenditures in the general fund. And we tested a number of strategies that we might employ to bridge that gap. What is included in this afternoon's presentation is a proposal that gets us to revenues that match expenditures, but it's not without some significant trade-offs. So at the highest level, I would describe what these strategies are as streamlining and restructuring, staffing changes. Staffing changes are really the most significant as they represent the largest portion of our budget. A number of cost recovery strategies that will get in motion this year, some of which are hoped for accomplishment in the actual fiscal year. Some limited changes to employee benefits, the temporary suspension of non-essential city contributions, and no general fund reserve use. And there is one minor note to that. The only general fund reserve use isn't for operational expenditures. It's for the final payment associated with our Regional Water Quality Control Board $1 million settlement. And so as of this year, we will have the opportunity to put that set of experiences behind us and pay in full the $1 million value owed. So the only general fund reserve use was for the final year of payment of $133,333,333.
$100,000.
133,333.
133, comma, 333. I apologize, I added one
Right.
extra.
Don't say $1 million.
Yeah,
Freaks us
our
out.
last payment wasn't $1 million.
Yeah, we
Okay.
don't want to be freaked out.
My apologies.
That's cool.
I did not choose to recap for council in this format because we've spent so much time running through projects. There are many, many special funds. Those funds have made possible a number of projects in the 18-19 fiscal year. They are included in page 5 and 6 of the budget memo. In general, they represent capital improvements that are highly visible in the community. Right now, we have the Volunteer Park APCD funded with a city local match project moving forward. We have the LTA Phase 11, Main Street Alley, North 8th Street, Rio Vista segment roadway project out to bid. These projects are large in general and are projects that are familiar to the council. So unless council wants to delve into those specific projects funded by special funds, we are moving forward with the program and the hopes and intent to accomplish as many of these deliverables as possible in what remains of the 2018-19 year. At this point, I would like to review the staffing changes and/or status updates on topics that pertain to staffing in the general fund cost centers. And for those of you following in the budget memo, you will see that I have detailed each of these positions one by one, including some proposed for elimination, some proposed for retention, some reduced in terms of the hours, and some positions proposed for temporary freeze.
You're talking about your list here on page
Correct.
3?
Page 3?
On page
Page
3.
3, the list, okay.
Right.
All right.
Okay, so included in the budget for council's consideration is continued freezing of the implementation of Fire Station Number 2's 50% staffing plan. When the station was originally established, the hope was to successfully implement a 50% staffing plan that would enable both stations to be in operation. Due to our tentative revenue projections over the last several years, we have delayed on the hiring of permanents and instead backfilled with full-time reserve staffing. And at this point, we are recommending as part of the assumptions for 18-19, the freeze of the 50% staffing plan for a third consecutive year. We are also proposing to eliminate one full-time reserve firefighter slot as of January 1, 2019.
What does that wind up saving us?
I will have Rosa up for a moment.
So it's okay, we don't have to necessarily go into that right now, but.
I will
what-
gladly, I think I've got them hidden up here, and I would happily, I think I can, I didn't want to bury you in tons of detail, but let me just, okay. So here, you will see if we had, we looked at a strategy as discussed at our budget check-in of what would happen if we first focused on elimination of reserve firefighter positions. And the hope was that we might have a modified strategy for keeping the station number 2 open and having what was referred to as brownouts. As we spent more time evaluating this alternative, it became clear, in spite of potentially eliminating 5 reserve firefighter positions with an implementation of January 1, and saving $127,000 a year, that it would result in the city only being able to responsibly staff one location.
Right.
In other words, it would close Station 2 immediately.
So these two moves that you're talking about, the freezing implementation and the eliminating the one reserve firefighter, ensures that Station 2 remains open as usual right now.
With one less reserve firefighter position funded.
Correct.
And as I get down the list, you'll see we also have a proposal to temporarily freeze what we expect will be a vacated fire marshal position.
Yeah, we can talk about that when we get down there. But for these two things, even with the vacating of the fire marshal position, we're still able to keep Station number 2 open. I think that's a primary concern of ours, but also I think a primary concern of the residents on the east side of Brawley.
Yes.
So as we've discussed.
And as we discovered in our further research, we also learned that the anticipated ISO rating changes would have a negative impact on insurance premiums citywide, so it really wasn't an east
It offsets
versus.
any potential benefit, right?
Right.
So-
It wasn't something that we could do, but this may be, with these moves, we would probably be okay for this coming year.
Correct.
Okay, and that's what our
Just-
concern is.
Yeah,
Yes.
just for clarification, so if we reduce it by 1, we would still be able to do the 24-hour on shifts
Yes.
without any problem?
Yes, we would continue operations, substituting in call paids when necessary. They are our folks that aren't on regular schedules. They're brought in on an as-needed basis. We could still minimally staff, not trade off safety standards or concerns for our staff responding to calls and needing minimum staffing levels to back those positions so they can enter fires.
Now, just for clarification, and I may be aware of this, but within this does not result in anybody being affected currently in those positions. It would be something that we would do as they become vacant or as things happen. in that situation.
So the fire marshal has announced his retirement, and we expect that will be a vacant position as of the January 1 implementation date. The reserve firefighter position is currently staffed.
It is staff, so that
Yes.
would result in us eliminating that position.
Correct.
Okay, so one person would be impacted by it.
Yes.
Okay. I just say that because I need to know that information.
Okay.
And I did notice in your notes, the fire marshal position retirement date is scheduled for this month?
It's in December.
December.
I believe it's the 6th,
So that-
I'm sorry, the 3rd of December. And what we did on that position is project out what accumulated leaves would be, et cetera. So it's not exactly the same as salary savings for a 6-month period. But it does amount in a savings and doesn't
Sure,
backfill
sure.
something that will be a continuing cost into the future.
Because there's a cost associated with departing.
Right. And in all of these scenarios that I begin to describe, I do want to do justice to the topic that there are trade-offs in all of these arrangements. The fire marshal duties, while we have moved to streamline some of our inspections for lower risk commercial purposes, the workload will be absorbed by our fire chief, and where an appropriate nexus exists with our shift personnel. So there are clear trade-offs and service level changes associated with these changes. But as you begin to kind of walk through with me the totality of the changes, they, from a staff point of view, are proposals that retain the highest level of service possible to the community and are consistent with minimum coverage, skeletal in some places, and continuous service.
Okay.
Okay? The third bullet that I will touch on is retention of the temporary position of graffiti abatement worker. And I would like you to know, first of all, for all of these positions, there are wonderful people that are serving the city in much needed capacities. And the reason this position has retained its temporary status is because of this tentative state we have been in financially. I did evaluate the option to eliminate the graffiti abatement worker position, but as I looked at the costs associated with savings, which if you'd like to see those, I have them available, that when I weigh that against our most recent outbreak on bus shelters and high visibility graffiti that at times really plagues our corridors and our neighborhoods, I chose to propose it as part of the assumptions. And so that position is currently will be a $12 an hour position. As of January 1, all of our minimum wages increased to $12. Okay. And I do assume that position on a go-forward basis. Just as a point of comparison, our reserve firefighters are also compensated at that same level.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see if I can get you the slide for graffiti abatement worker. Okay.
That's it. Okay.
A 6-month basis, $20,000, fully burdened, presented in that figure.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, let's continue going forward and line by line, but let's.
Okay, I'll try to pick up the pace. Also proposed in the 18-19 budget is reducing the senior center coordinator hours from 40 hours to 25 hours per week. This change is proposed as January 1, 2019. A number of changes were considered for the general fund cost center of Parks and Recreation. Staff is available to discuss in full what some of the implications would be of eliminating beyond the 15 hours, what it would do to our service levels. We have used temporary staffing in the Parks and Rec department to fill some really important gaps, but we have not backfilled with permanent slots because of our tentative financial state. What that means is the system for providing the services is very fragile. And when we remove those temporary low-wage positions, we literally remove the service out of operation. So as I further researched with Parks and Recreation the option to eliminate the senior center coordinator, consider reducing the number of temporary maintenance workers and eliminating the admin secretary temp position that's there. It basically translated from a service level point of view of no rec leagues, no summer day camp, really, really challenging conditions that the judgment call I made was continuing to provide a certain level of service could best be achieved by retaining those $12 per hour positions come January 1.
You are proposing a reduction in hours for the senior center coordinator from, was it 40 to 25?
40, correct.
But there's no guarantee that that person will remain on board. I mean, if they're looking
Correct.
for employment, and that experience goes away as well. So I think there's some danger in doing that.
That's part of the.
I had a question on that too. By reducing it to 40 to 25 hours, what services will any other services be eliminated? Because
Right. So I would
what
like
can
to
you-
have up, Marjo, and I'll begin with stating that our hours of operation, heaviest use, tend to cluster around a specific time of day.
Okay.
Heavy use does not continue into the evening. And the end goal of all of these proposed arrangements truly was to do my job in presenting a balanced budget
Understood.
and not assume general fund reserve use.
What is the cost savings on that if it were reduced from 40 hours to 25?
Rosa, I just had you run that number before I came in. Was it 53 or 35?
I don't think it's worth it.
It's minimal.
$5,300
For what?
to bring to reduce her from 40 to 25 would result in a $5,300 savings.
Over
A year?
A year?
6 months.
Over 6
Oh,
months.
6 months.
So
So $10,600.
Okay. And Marja, would you like to talk through the program side?
With talking with Tanya, who actually has a position right now, about changes that could possibly happen if the hours are reduced. She talked about the fact that the seniors are dropped off about 8:30. Catholic Services runs food from 9 to 12, and then there's a cleanup after. So she would propose being open at 8:30, which is when she opens now, for the people to have a safe place to stay. Catholic Charities is completely done by 1, so she would leave at 1:30. That would still allow us to offer all the events that happen during the meal service. It would also allow us to continue with the IVC nutrition and exercise classes. It would also allow us to continue with early afternoon Zumba and some of those things. What it might eliminate is things that happen between 1:30 and 3 for people who like to get together and do crafts or yarn work or those kinds of things. But the majority of making sure that the core services of having Catholic Services meals available, and having Tanya also available for helping anybody would also be there. Because one of the things we talked about is that part of the nature of the senior center is that people bring in forms to have help with translation or understanding what they're doing, et cetera, and that 25 hours would allow her to continue to do that. But it would just reduce, basically the 1:30 to 3 is the other time that people are there, and it's mostly what we call hangout time, where they're gathering and they might play cards, they might just hang out because it's comfortable. It might also change having the senior center as a cool center, which the library is nearby too, or a few blocks away. So that might change a little bit too for services in the summer.
I think the thing that we're failing to recognize is that although the hours of the programs would be covered, it doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't work involved after those programs are completed, and so that's one thing. And the other item that we need to consider is whether or not any employee is not going to be, obviously if you're going from 25 hours or 40 hours to 25 hours, if somebody's looking for a full-time position, and they can decide to leave. And so that's another item that we need to consider. But thank you for the information.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you've seen them do Zumba, so you know how happy they are.
No, I understand. I mean, it's just a lot to consider. My own personal opinion is that I want to try and preserve as many of these smaller,
A large expense item.
yeah,
Compensation.
smaller
Small
item,
compensation.
yeah, lower level compensated positions, just because they provide a service. And, you know, we have some people that have been there for a long time, and have some very good experience, so, you know.
And I would like to note that the 15-hour reduction, the proper figure is $5,135.83. That's for the 6-month reduction period.
That's a
Rosanna?
Yes.
10,000.
I know that, I think that question was asked, but when we're talking about eliminating the position, was that the same amount of savings for the firemen then? Because that's a minimum wage also?
Right, so because of the Affordable Care Act and the family size that individuals have, there is a variation for each employee if they are insurance eligible. Because of the way our policies are currently written, their medical allowance varies based on their household size. So that accounts for differences between how one $12 an hour employee versus another, what costs are involved with them.
Okay.
Okay.
So the savings,
close, though. I
the
mean,
savings for the
it's-
firefighter would be different.
Would be
because
different, but
he
it might,
qualifies for the.
Right.
but how much difference are we talking about? From 5,000 to what, 6,000, 7,000?
If you'd like detail, I can certainly give you detail. If you give me just one moment, I think I've got my figures, okay. So the differences can range from $3,800 per month to
Okay.
$4,500 per month.
That's in compensation?
It's compensation plus allowance.
Plus allowance,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
It gets, there's a lot of detail
A lot
to
of-
it, but,
Okay.
It is somewhat
Thank you.
complicated. That's fine.
okay.
We kind of got an idea where we're going.
So as we began to talk through Parks and Rec, I explained that we did look at many different options for cuts that could occur. A elimination of the senior center coordinator would literally eliminate the open hours of that location, so we chose to retain it at proposed retention at a scaled back level. We also, we talked through a little bit, I mentioned what would happen with no admin secretary, what that would mean to programming, and how problematic that was. And when I looked at the option of eliminating 2 full-time temporary maintenance workers, also at $12 an hour come January 1, the trade-offs with reference to overgrown grass, no longer being able to prep any fields for any leagues that use our facilities, the trade-offs were too great and led me to a recommendation to you this evening to retain the 2 temporary maintenance worker positions at Parks and Rec. What is also recommended is the continued freezing of the Parks and Rec director position. As you know, our library director, Marjo Mello, has been serving in that interim capacity. And I'm very grateful for her willingness to take on a 7-day-a-week operation that goes well into the evening hours and starts at the crack of dawn. And no change is actually proposed in the 18-19 budget. It is recommended to continue in that combination format, to incorporate a Parks and Rec director back into the operations anywhere near the prior compensation offered for any of the past 3 directors would take us well into the 6-figure all-in range. And I do not see the financial resources available at this time to accomplish a change in the staffing at that level. What I'd like to do next is move into the realm of public safety, specifically law enforcement. As you know, last year our DOJ, Department of Justice grant expired for school resource officers. We had a great working relationship with Brawley Union High School as well as Brawley Elementary School District. The council chose to move forward with an additional extended arrangement utilizing general fund dollars, but with the beginning of July 1, And the invitation to both school districts to participate in cost sharing, we proceeded with a single school resource officer position. So the assumption in the budget for 18-19 is 2 to 1, so going to 1, and total cost recovery from Brawley Union High School for all hours performed. Now, if we pull that person back into our staffing needs in the operations, we pay for the person when they're working on city
Yes.
issues, but as long as they are available to serve as school resource officers, our high school district will reimburse us for all time associated with their efforts.
If they can wish to continue.
If
with
they
the
wish to
office.
continue.
They will continue through the current budget year. Our commitment from them is participation through June 30.
But it's not a complete savings for us of a full officer, because sometimes they will work they will not be doing school duties like,
But I
say,
think the
during-
expectation is that they're fully committed to that. In the
Yes.
event that we do need them for an emergency,
Then we
that they
would
would.
pull them.
It's less than ideal for
Yeah.
the school district for us to pull them
Right.
back.
Yes,
But
but-
we retain the option to do so if
In an
our staffing
emergency.
needs
All right.
call
Okay,
for it.
I don't know that that's, okay.
Okay.
Well, it actually does come into play with staffing reductions, so I want to talk a little bit further about that with the help of our police chief.
Okay.
So with reference to PD, we have a number of current vacant positions. And in the general fund cost center, these are, the police department is the only department that has current vacancies. Now, as mentioned in prior presentations to the council, just because they're vacancies doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best for the organization to freeze those vacancies. It means that the impacts to affected employees are vastly reduced. So I'll begin first with describing what we have in our current staffing configuration is a vacant part-time dispatcher. That role is intended to serve kind of as a floater role to our dispatching professionals who go on vacation, have lives that might involve getting sick, and other issues that might interrupt a normal work schedule. And so that dispatcher temp part-time position is meant to kind of serve as a stopgap to addressing needs when our normal personnel are not available to perform the work of the dispatch center.
Do we have more than one of those?
It is currently one role, part-time, and vacant. And I will share with you the current configuration. We are staffed in all of our permanent positions for
Yes.
dispatch.
I remember us getting
Our
that.
part-time position, I have approved a request that spanned, maybe it's been 6 or 8 weeks, to use the resources associated with the part-time dispatcher to catch up with some records-related items and an audit that was internally performed. And so that position, the resources associated with that position in the first half of the fiscal year 18-19 have been to provide key support to audit activities within. So we've got someone performing some records-related
Okay.
duties. We do have an active background underway with a dispatcher candidate. We are not at a stage of extending that opportunity to the individual or determining whether or not a part-time position would be acceptable versus a
Okay.
full-time.
And don't worry about it. I think,
Okay.
at this point in time.
And Chief, I'm going to look to you. Is there any other piece of that you might want to augment?
In regards to good afternoon, Mayor and honorable members of council, Robert Sawyer, Police Chief. In regards to the dispatch position, no, I spoke to that at the last meeting, was that in regards to the number of staff we have on duty at any given time and the amount of emergency traffic they handle for not only police, but for fire and mutual aid assistance across the north end of the county as
Right.
well. So I'd be more than willing to answer any questions you might have in regards to the part-time dispatch position, should there be any.
Any questions from council?
How much of an impact would that have? Because like Rosanna said, that they've been using that person to do other duties to help out with the audit and stuff. So how much of an impact do you feel it would have if that person were not retained?
So correct. At the beginning of the fiscal year, for a short period of time, we did have that position filled because we were not full with our permanent employees. So that person was being utilized on a part-time basis, but working pretty much 40 hours a week to be able to staff the communication center and provide the level of service that the citizens of our city require. Once we transitioned the part-time person in that role to a full-time role, which was within the last 3 months, that created a vacant part-time position, and due to some auditing needs and some records catch-up that we needed to conduct, we transitioned another individual who's not dispatch qualified into the role of a temporary employee for a short period of time. The overall impact of freezing the position would really be in overtime accrued by the communication center to cover for shortages and lack of the part-time employee.
Okay.
As I discussed previously, the phones don't stop ringing, the radio traffic doesn't stop, and with one employee in there, things can easily be missed, and it can be critical in nature. So the ideal situation would be to have 3 employees. We cannot do that at the present time, but minimally 2 employees in the communication center, at least as much of the day as we can for the 24-hour period.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for the information.
You're welcome.
Just as an additional item of note, thank you, Chief, the dispatcher position is paid at a $16.65 per hour rate. It's not a $12 per hour position.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay.
Good enough. Okay.
Okay. Move on to our next section, as it relates to PD. As council is aware, we have 4 current vacant officer positions with the department. And as has been covered in prior discussions with the council and workshop formats, while we have some challenges with retention, when we reduce the number of funded positions, it can sometimes aggravate the circumstances. Our best effort is undertaken from an HR point of view to continuously recruit. And internally, manpower is devoted to conducting backgrounds so that we're clearing people to get on eligibility lists. I want to be honest and direct with the council that in the 7 years I've been with the city, I think there's only been one occasion that all of our positions were successfully matched with talents of public safety officials. So the difficulty is maximizing the availability of personnel to serve public demands at the same time as ensuring that our queue is moving at a rate that if somebody is going to leave us after a number of years with the city, that there's someone ready to go.
Right.
Our end goal is always to have an eligibility list with people waiting in the wings, but
But
the
it still
truth of the
takes
matter
time.
is, those folks, at the time they're applying to us, they're
Applying.
applying to many places. And while we have great hopes for the future of IVC and the prospects coming out of there, we continue to be challenged by vacancies. So one of the proposals built into the proposed budget does include a freezing of 4 vacant police officer positions. If there were any upside whatsoever to a reduction of staffing in this area, it's that we can save over $300,000. And there are going to be definite service level trade-offs, and I would like Chief to kind of walk through specifically what those are. I have shared with all of you a memorandum with reference to the services that would no longer be offered if this change moves forward. As is compelling with every department for which content is presented today, the question that I think everybody grapples with is, if not in this department, where? And so really you begin to see kind of how complicated all the variables in play are. We could move to eliminate temp workers, but the dollar values associated with temp workers overall and the shutdown of services, clear trade-offs. So with that, I will invite our police chief up to talk through the scenarios. And as an item of note, I did have an opportunity to brief one-on-one with some council members. So Chief is well prepared to address questions both of if all four go, what will not be performed? And if there's a desire to pursue a different format, what would that translate to in terms of service level possibilities?
Okay.
And cost.
And
Yes,
cost.
and costs.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. So currently, we have 29 police officers performing various functions throughout the city. Our 30th position is filled at the school as part of the contract with the Brawley Union High School School District. We have 4 vacancies, and I believe I mentioned this at the last meeting, 2 of which would be assigned to a quality of life or vice team to handle various complaints throughout the city as they come in. 1 would consist of a traffic enforcement officer, which we currently do not have, and the 4th position would be a task force officer at the Drug Enforcement Administration with some benefits there from asset forfeiture and participation. So those are currently not filled. Those are the 4 positions that are vacant today. My concern is something that Rosanna and the city manager, talked about earlier, was that if we were to reduce the positions from 33 positions to the 29, it's very difficult to understand the reasons why, but very quickly I'm concerned that we would be at 27 or 26 employees rather than the 29. And facing that, our primary function will be to provide for the safety of the citizens of Brawley, which would require us to be able to have those people on the street. We would have to remove our current positions that we have at the school as a school resource officer, at the task force for the Imperial Valley Border Enforcement Task Force, and the Narcotics Task Force. All 3 of those positions currently have monies paid to the city or available to the city in terms of pay for their current positions. Not all of them are fully funded. The school resource officer is the only fully funded position. Nonetheless, the other 2 do have monetary value associated with their assignments, which would be lost if we were to pull them back.
Chief, if I could interrupt and just ask this question very directly. Of the 4 vacant police officer positions, if you had to make a decision right now to say we can only retain 2 and 2 would be eliminated, which 2 would be eliminated? Or at least, I shouldn't say eliminated, just frozen for the time being. Which ones would you freeze?
So right now, I would, and it's a tough decision because there's always a
understand.
trade-off.
I understand.
But what I would propose at this point would be the vice team or the quality of life team.
Okay. And retain the task force and the traffic control option?
Correct.
'Cause- and then those are money-generating positions as well, right?
They do generate some
Yeah.
opportunity for income
Yeah.
to the city in terms of asset forfeiture and
Yeah.
traffic offender funds. But by participating in the task forces, we also have the ability to leverage some of the opportunities to have
resources.
their assistance in our city.
Yeah.
So that's important to us if we don't have the quality of life team that we've discussed.
Understood, thank you. And I hate to put you on that spot, but it's just, we're in that position now, so.
understand.
Mr. Mayor, if I might ask a question, which would you retain if we were only going to hire 1 person? Who would you?
Given my review, and again, I've been with the city for a short period of 4 months, but my review of all the statistical information available to me and operational data, I think we would have to fill the traffic enforcement position because of the increase in collisions we've seen with the decline in citations issued.
Okay.
Becomes a safety issue for our citizens.
Thank you,
Okay.
Chief. And again, I know it's a direct question, but this is what we're having to do now, so
I understand.
I appreciate it. Appreciate the information. Any other questions from council?
Maybe more observation, maybe some validation from Chief. Again, it's been 4 months, but I think you've probably done a thorough review of kind of our recent history as far as staff retainment, et cetera. So as the city manager presented, having the continuous hiring, we had enough turnover to where it seems like we're just trying to keep up with just this current par level. and having challenges is even trying to fulfill all four of these when we're trying. So
Correct.
with that in mind, to your point, you were talking about a bigger concern of dropping to 27 or 26. I think it's important, as much as we want to staff one or two or more of what are these potential frozen positions, I think if we keep doing what we're doing, has it pretty much proven to more or less barely keep us at the 29 plus 1, kind of in that area anyways?
I would say currently, we continue to struggle, because even though we are allotted the number of positions currently, at any given time, you have between 10 to 20% of your workforce out for a number of different reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
And so as those individuals are out of the workforce, we still have the same amount of work to do. We still have the same calls for service and the same service level that we want to provide the citizens of the community. So we have to have some trade-off there.
And the
Otherwise, we
positions-
just run people into the ground.
Or the positions may not even be filled, even if it's, it
Right.
just, right.
With the
I understand what you're
continuous-
saying,
yeah, yeah.
regardless of what we're doing, it's still
Yeah.
resulting in the 29 or 30 officers
Yeah.
currently, yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
Okay.
thank you.
It's a good point.
Interesting.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So with Chief's explanation, we have made our way through the majority of reductions with one exception. Included in the proposed budget is a part-time employee or position that allows for janitorial work performed in the admin office and for at 10 hours per week.
Could we haven't discussed code enforcement, which is up on your list.
Yes.
We're going to discuss that later?
Yes.
Is that what you?
I thought I would hit those two as
Okay.
just continued.
All right.
The social media
Just wanted to be
and
Okay.
code enforcement,
Just want to be
yes.
sure.
So with reference to the maintenance worker slash janitor, assumed in the budget is a reduction of 20 hours per week at the $12 per hour rate. And I've described the work that that individual performs or that role fulfills here in the admin office. At the police department, it is an augmentation to a janitorial contract. The janitorial contract primarily addresses the interior of the operations, and the 10-hour per week support effort is to address the exterior. So trade-offs involved in all of these changes.
It's limited cost though, too. I
Yeah,
mean, I
very
think for our,
That's
when
the
you
minimum
have
wage.
members of the public coming into this facility on a daily basis, I think that's an important item that we need to really look at.
And-
And there's certain things we can cut and certain things we can't.
And we've kind of discussed the public restroom issue, and I think we've had a lot of discussions with both you and staff here about that situation. So I'm a little concerned with that.
So
I
am I.
mean, just as on an overall basis, depending upon what we're savings. His total work hours are 40? or
20.
20.
It's 10
10
at
here,
admin, 10
10
at
at
PD.
And we're talking about eliminating both of those.
Correct,
So
and it represents combined about $7,200
a
for
year,
the,
a 6 month.
6 months.
A 6-month timeframe, okay, 6-month timeframe, okay. I'm not as concerned, well, I guess I am concerned with the police department, the outside and all of that type of thing, but I'm more concerned with this office and who's gonna do janitorial and how do we accomplish that at under $7,200 every 6 months.
Right, we have looked at the option of including the admin office and the janitorial contracts that service the library, PD, Public Works, and finance, but the cost is far greater to contract the service than it is to have a limited basis,
Person
a
doing
minimum
that.
wage
Person doing that,
employee to
correct.
perform that work here at the admin
You're
office.
not
and
saving
it's
any money by
Yeah.
doing that, yeah, and I don't see.
We need to charge a licensing fee for that old Brawley Police Department monument sign that comes out in every investigative ID show, and like, I just saw it in a movie the other day. I was like, that actual sign, the Brawley PD sign,
Yeah.
crazy. But anyway.
Okay.
In addition to the PD changes, there are two additional notes I'd like to make. The first is that, per council action, a 6-month demonstration was carried out for restoring a code enforcement officer position. The results have been excellent. but the 6-month period expires next week, so assumed in the budget is the expiration of the temporary arrangement. And also assumed is holding on the hire of a temporary social media coordinator, which council has expressed a great deal of interest in helping to get public engagement improved and encouraged.
I think, I found, some greater focus recently, just I'm not as busy working on my own project, so I can help, and if the rest of council can help promote some things just online, I think we can get through the next 12 months, and
Right.
we'll revisit the topic maybe in 6 months and see where we're
That
at.
would
But
be
I think, for now, I think that we can manage with what we have.
Okay.
So I have detailed the staffing changes that are proposed, and would also like to note that per our last presentation before council, we are continuing to evaluate various cost recovery strategies. We are in process and assume in the budget some revenues coming in before the end of the fiscal year as it relates to fire suppression and EMS. We have, believe, presented some modest revenue projections in the research that has been conducted. It's clear that the recovery strategy, it's very important that we first gain a complete handle on the actual cost, then scale a policy for charges based on the actual cost. The recovery rate typically charged is 17 to 20%, with 20% being more likely the norm, and 50% of payers in the mix. And state or federally supported insurance policies typically pay less than the full amount charged.
Right.
So
Well,
just
I think we're well aware of that. I
Okay.
think we've had this discussion before.
for the sake of bridging the difference, which, last meeting we were talking about the $900,000 to $1 million gap, we are assuming with all of these proposed cuts and a number of additional reductions and cost recovery to bridge that gap in its entirety. And for the EMS and fire suppression services, we assume approximately $250,000 before the close of the fiscal year. That will be a huge effort to undertake because we have to go out to bid for the vendor services provided and get a strong hold on costs and policies necessary for the council to adopt prior to moving forward.
I'm assuming timing's going to be important on that, and we need to move forward as soon as possible. I mean, I'm thinking,
The sooner it can be implemented,
I think
the
we
more
need to
likely.
implement that quickly. There's
Right.
certain cost recovery. I think other ones we're going to discuss probably a lot more, and other ones don't necessarily bring in the amount of money that one does.
Correct.
So I
That is
think-
by far the
Start charging this guy every time he interrupts today. Anyway.
Sure.
That is by far the largest revenue source identified in cost recovery. PD has also taken a closer look at the existing alarm permit and false alarm fees and potential changes to ordinance that would allow us to actually implement what we have on the books. And that will continue on a moving forward basis. And we have a number of efforts that we'll continue to evaluate along with legal counsel as to applicability. Road closures are not assumed for the city paying on a move forward. Continued participation in cattle call activities is, but the additional special event requests that are presented to the city year-round are not assumed in the budget, and we will continue to recommend cost recovery on all of those requests. Also noted in the budget memo on page 3 is potential changes in employee benefits. The city will be taking a very close look at implementation for January 1, 2019 as it relates to cash in lieu of benefits and participation in the city's CalPERS insurance program. So staff have the opportunity, as part of an opt-out provision, if they can provide evidence of coverage. Our current benefit allows for a person to take cash in lieu of receiving the actual benefit as a program enrollee. Our bargaining agreements restrict this benefit in a number of areas, and we hope to work with our partners in the bargaining units to find some common ground in the future. For those employees who are not subject to bargaining agreements, we are looking to move forward with elimination of the cash in lieu of benefit come January 2019. And that amounts to just shy of $80,000. The next area that is noted in the budget memo is temporary suspension of non-essential city contributions. And you will see the city has approximately 4 contributions or memberships pending. These include IVEDC at $5,000, the Small Business Development Corporation at $10,000, the Film Commission at $5,000, and CalEd at $460. At this time, staff's recommendation is to temporarily suspend these contributions for the year and revisit the topic in 1920 for support. I do want to note for the record, we have our partners at the chamber here in attendance. The city has made its annual contribution to the chamber for $10,000 in the first quarter of the fiscal year. The city is in receipt of 2 specific requests, one being from the chamber and one being for the Small Business Development Center. And I would not wish to forego the opportunity to mention that an invitation to join in supporting joint efforts is in receipt. The Chamber of Commerce's request was to attribute 45% of the city's transient occupancy tax revenues to support economic development activities undertaken by the chamber. This amounts to approximately $155,534. This change in expenditures or contributions is not assumed in the budget. And should council wish to go that direction in the future, we would undertake efforts for cuts to achieve freeing up those resources to make that contribution. The Small Business Development Center, as presented at the $10,000 level, has presented a formal solicitation to the city. I have recently met with staff for the SBDC and leadership of that group. I think there is increasing awareness of how difficult an ask this is to local agencies. And I have not made proactive contact with any of the organizations with reference to temporary suspension. So at this time, the proposal before council includes holding on continued financial support with the intent to revisit in the future and retain the skeletal staffing that's part of our plan. So I have made my way through with you all of the areas of the balanced budget that is presented to you this afternoon. As noted, the general fund reserve set aside requires 15% of operational revenues to be put in safekeeping for a rainy day. If that 15% value were adhered to, the city would need to look at additional cuts. At this time, I did not propose cuts for council's consideration that would achieve the 15% set aside in light of all of the variables in play. I am proposing for council's consideration the set aside of $1.7 million as opposed to 2.2. And that $1.7 million represents 11.7% of operational expenditures.
And just as a refresher to council members, the 15% set aside was set aside by council. Council decided
Yes.
that number. It wasn't something that's dictated by anybody. It was just something, a policy that we came up with. Can you refresh my memory, Rosanna, with respect to when we set that policy? I know it's been several years,
I
but.
believe it's 2012.
2012, all right. Thank
I
you.
can cross-check that and confirm with you via email, but if I recall correctly, it's
Yeah,
2012.
so I just want to let you all know that it's not something that was, there's no requirement or anything like that. It was just something that council chose to do, to always try and have that amount of money available for general fund reserve. You know, and so there's been times where we've used over $1 million in reserves. There's been times where we use very little. There's been times where we have a balanced budget. So just food for thought.
I think at that time, too, we had a year that we had we had quite a bit of money in order to set aside with meeting all our expenditures. And I think we chose the 15%. Like you say, it was a decision that the council made at the time to choose the 15%, but it doesn't have to be 15%.
But there was some money that came in for, I
Something-
can't.
It was due
Something came
to
in.
us calling bonds and
Right.
reimbursing the city for
Right.
legal expenses incurred, and we used the settlement
That's
money to
right.
pay the city back.
And a lot of people use a 10% reserve, a lot of people use, any percentage of 5%, 8%. It just depends upon what you feel is adequate to meet any yearly demands. We do have things that come in out of the budget, outside of the budget, and we've always been able to utilize a little bit of that money for that purpose. So, and you're right, we did make that decision, but it's not bound by law or anything else.
If I may, before council enters into the deliberation phase of today's action item, I do want to take just a quick moment to check in regarding the projects identified. On page 5, continuing on page 6, there is one very special item of note that I want to be very deliberate about sharing with you. As previously presented by our city engineer, our water plant is experiencing some need for attention as a result of age. And so you'll see in the water fund, Fund 501, a number of large-scale projects that have come to you in, one of them most recently as an emergency design scenario that we're pursuing. So I do want to take a moment to highlight that the increase in needs at the water plant to the $1.2 million level for the sedimentation pond components replacement, in addition to the other proposals that are a part of it, have led us to reduce the number of dollars attributed to the Main Street Waterline project. So I don't want the time to pass without me making sure I let you know, the $1,160,000 figure isn't enough to complete the project, but what we're trying to do is create a placeholder so that we don't expend it. What staff was directed to do on the finance end of the operations was to determine the debt service ratios, the minimum ratios that we can retain in the water fund, and then anything in excess would be available for attributing to the Main Street Waterline Replacement Project. Our hope is to plug through delivery of many of these projects and get to a point for Main Street that we can look at financing alternatives, because waiting for the pay-as-you-go scenario isn't going to work for us knowing that it's a $4 million project.
I was about to say and suggest the same thing, because, to be quite honest with you, the waterline replacement project, we've had that figure before us, I don't know how many times.
Yes.
And who knows how accurate that is now, right? And so.
That isn't the actual figure. That's just the dollars that would be available.
Right, no, I
Yeah.
understand, but who knows
The 4
what the,
million, yeah.
what the cost would be today,
Mhm.
right?
Cost,
And so
right.
it may be a lot more, it could be less, but it likely would be more money to complete the
Yes.
project now. So we do need to look at what our financing options are, you know?
We have begun preliminary exploration. When we secure the outside financing, it's really an integrated approach. I can't do it in a vacuum. It requires our city engineer and finance bandwidth. So all of us have to be available to produce numbers to support application processes. And given the changes that we've encountered in recent years, it has not been possible to place that at the top of the list. So,
I wonder if we were to outsource that particular project, meaning just the presentation of a package for financing, if that could be considered.
the preliminary isn't the hard part, it's we have to
The internal
give
work and
them.
everything.
And we, just so you know, we have a very, very modest contract that is assumed in professional services in Gordon's cost center. A former deputy of HCD who has been advising the county of Imperial has come to meet with many of us smaller jurisdictions and offered some insight into how to navigate priority projects and state
And
financing.
we-
His
we
name is
did-
Chris Westlake.
Did we
And
meet
so-
with them? Was it the same gentleman that we met with now? I'm
I'm
sorry to
not sure
interrupt.
if you and I met with him. I know he's been in the valley because he set up the opportunity zones. He was
Oh, that's right, yeah.
the key guy.
That was a
set
gentleman that we met with here, wasn't it, here? At any rate.
I wouldn't be
yeah,
surprised.
yeah,
He did make present a proposal that's a much larger amount than what we arrived at, which is $5,000 on an as-needed basis. We have a CDBG NOFA coming out, and so he's going to provide us with some strategic guidance on how to best position our projects for success. But he'd be a fantastic resource. It still doesn't address some of the issues that we have internally in moving items forward. But as we get through the audit, this budget tonight, and the next round of audit preparation, which is what we will basically end this and start our year-end activities, getting all of our W-2s out, everything that goes with that, and then moving towards audit work for the 17-18 year. I'm hopeful that the finance department's availability will increase.
I just had a question. I had a question on the water fund. You have 2 water line replacement projects that have the same amount of money geared toward them.
Oh, I'm
The
sorry, it is, it's various
1,160,000.
segments. My apology, it is a typo. It's the same project.
It's the same project
Yes.
at 1,160,000.
I
Okay.
apologize,
That's-
yes.
That's just the question. I didn't want to be
Yeah.
confused. It's right here. It's 1 million and then 1,160,000. There's 2 water lines.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions too, that we kind of, sections that we ran over quickly. The $250,000 for cost recovery for fire department, is that actual revenue after all of the costs associated with
That's-
billing and everything? Okay.
Yeah, and we just did, there's lots of sophistication in the modeling that's possible, but we took a very, very simple approach of a particular value for EMS and a particular value for fire suppression. There's lots of let's say we extricate somebody from a vehicle, or we deal with a hazmat issue. There's a bunch of different pricing strategies associated with the actual responding team. There's a rate associated if your chief is part of the response. There's all kinds of ways to structure it. We tried our best to be modest and not overstate what we could gain. And that's how we arrived at the $250,000. It still will be hard for us to get it in place via ordinance, going out to bid, getting the vendor selected to achieve those savings. I don't want to kid you that we're not going to be pulling some long hours to make that happen, but that is the goal.
Okay. And then also with the code enforcement, all the feedback I've gotten on code enforcement has been positive. And so I know that it will be somewhat of a loss.
Except for the RVs, that was.
Except for the
except
RVs.
RVs.
That wasn't fun.
And it's not over yet.
It's not
It's
over
just
yet.
Not over
delayed.
yet.
Yes.
It's not over yet, yes.
But I would like to see us try to retain that, do another 6-month, go 6 months at a time with it.
Would you be willing to propose another area that you're willing to see a cut?
Well, have there been any revenue that come from code enforcement so
No.
far?
Our code enforcement actions typically involve when they do get exhausted in terms of gaining cooperation from a live owner. They typically translate to us performing a cleanup, attaching a lien that sometime in the next 50 years we'll be lucky enough to recover.
Mr. Mayor, might I suggest, because I think all of us might have some things we want to pick out. I think we can in deliberation, so instead of kind of, hey, I'd like to keep this, maybe we collectively kind of throw it all out there, deliberate amongst us, and then
I'll go and sit down.
move forward.
Yes.
Because I think that would be the exact point. I don't want to suggest keeping something without helping to provide some solution of where it's going to come from, for us to do that, so.
Gotcha.
So I'm with you, Councilmember
Yeah.
Hamby. I just say we're all going to have probably some things we want to bubble up.
So your proposal is considering not utilizing the reserve account at this point?
The 1.7.
Correct, because we do have some outstanding issues that we are anticipating will consume
A good portion.
greater than 50% of that value.
Which is the court, the thing that we discussed, okay. Court case with the revenue
Goodness, man,
return.
it's always something, right?
Yeah. But that's about half, about 50-some-odd%.
All right.
Over
Oh,
Over half.
why don't we just start from the very top with respect to what's being proposed by our city managers? I know there's been a tremendous amount of work put in by the finance department, by the department heads, and by our city manager. So I certainly appreciate that, and I know we're having some, very direct conversations here, and even direct questioning with our chief. So don't think at any point that we consider, reducing hours or eliminating positions as something easy and just as simple of a flick of a, pen and it's done. So we're going to deliberate amongst council members. We all have a little bit of a different priority, I think, and so, but I think overall, we're interested in seeing the city move forward. So, having said that, I do want to thank everyone for participating in the process, and especially finance, our city manager's office, and our department heads for putting the information together and providing feedback on, areas they can see, being, where we can have some cost savings for the city. So, anyway, let's move forward, please. We're talking about, and we'll go down the list if we could. On list is on page 3, and we'll start from the very top. Freezing implementation of the fire station number 2, 50% staffing plan for a third consecutive year. Is there any objection to that particular topic? Or any suggestions on that particular topic?
I thought it was a good balanced approach, again, as the overall philosophy of trying to maximize our coverage, our service delivery, but at the same time trying to realize some savings. So I think that that balance is presented in the overall proposal here. But I think that's in line with that. So just, again, my opinion, there's a little creativity there. There is something we have to do, but we're minimizing our cut. We're keeping Station 2 open. I think that's pretty key.
Any other input on that particular topic?
Oh, I basically support we need to keep that station number 2 open also and continue the services, even though we may not have the exact level of service with the other consideration of the one, well, I'm going into the other one, I guess, reserve firefighter, but currently with the staffing that's been there for the 3 years.
The interaction I've had with fire personnel, it's not ideal, but I appreciate that they recognize that everything is tight and that they all are contributing in a way to keep the city afloat and provide the services that we need and that people are used to. And the feedback I've gotten is that they will maintain, they'll work hard and try to keep things going the way they have been, and I appreciate that.
Any other input? So
I'm okay with it simply because we haven't implemented it yet. It's just on hold. It's
Yeah.
been on hold, so since it isn't a done deal, we're not taking anything necessarily away. So.
all right, so we'll move past that topic, and we're in agreement there?
Yes.
All right. So next is eliminating one full-time reserve firefighter as of January 1st, 2019. Thoughts, observations on this particular topic?
My comment would be as it relates to the first item, again, overall with, and I think all the fire-related ones, if we want to kind of clump those, my comments would be the same, overall keeping the service level where it's at.
So you would be in favor of retaining the position or eliminating
the
it?
one full
Yeah?
reserve, so just as presented. 'cause
As
again,
presented, okay.
I think if we change any of these, we need to talk about where it's going to come from, so.
Right,
I'm trying to
okay.
stay consistent with the proposal.
I support also that particular, eliminating the one full-time reserve firefighter after discussing, what impact, if any, would have on the operation. I think it should be fine.
Okay.
The only concern that I have with it is we have someone in that position. We're going to eliminate their position. Yeah, I would prefer it to be a vacant position or something that we hadn't filled, but I'm willing to go along with it just for the good of the budget if that's what's necessary.
Understood. Any other comments?
No.
No? No?
Mayor Nova, may I make one just brief mention, something I failed to share with the council? The city of Brawley does have a contract with the county of Imperial to respond to fires in unincorporated areas. That contract amounts to approximately $140,000 a year, and one of the factors, in addition to the ISO rating changes that could affect us citywide, with the closure of Station 2, we would lose the contract because we wouldn't have the ability to respond in the same fashion. So I just wanted to make sure that folks were aware that $140,000 per year revenue source that we can count on annually to support operations would be preserved with the proposed strategy.
Very well. So it sounds like there is consensus amongst council in moving forward with the recommendation on that? Okay. Next is retaining the temporary position of graffiti abatement worker. I'm in favor of retaining the position. I think it's a great resource for the city, and it's just visually, it's impactful, so. Any other comments?
Definitely.
I'm in agreement.
I concur.
And Alex, you got a golden eye, too. I don't know how you match that paint. You do a very good job.
I get compliments all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
You really do. I remember when we had volunteers painting, and it was like, it was very
Oh, it was
obvious,
terrible.
very, very
I think I
obvious.
was
I hate to, well, I don't want to
Yeah.
say it was,
Yeah.
but.
It was
sometimes-
even worse than the graffiti itself sometimes, you know what I mean?
I think it was donated paint
Yeah,
of any
yeah.
color.
Yes, it was any color.
Well, that's what he uses, though. He blends it
I know,
well.
he blends it.
At any rate, thank you, and let's move forward. Retaining the position of senior center coordinator at a reduced level of 25 hours. Would be about $10,300 approximately.
For a full year,
For a
but
full year.
to get us through the fiscal year, it would be half of that.
It would
so
be half of that, so
51.36.
51.36. That would be our savings, reducing that position by 15 hours a week. My concern is that although the hours of operation for the various programs that are taking place would be covered, it still would not cover all the additional work that goes into place. And my concern too is that, we have somebody who's been there for quite some time, well respected at that facility by the seniors and the participants, and so the experience is lost if she decides to leave because of reduction in hours. So when you're used to working full-time and now you're working part-time, that's a big difference. So that's just my 2 cents. So in my own opinion, I would be in favor of retaining that position. I realize there's some cost, but I would be willing to absorb that cost through the use of general reserve funds. So that
I
would
agree
be-
with that.
Mr. Mayor, maybe, and that's kind of where I made the comment in the previous review budget discussion, which is we should, as we're going along, kind of tally what those really relatively small amounts are, and obviously the service we get in return. So we can kind of track that sort of high level here. I know they're not exact dollars. And then maybe as a council, we propose where we can cover that. So we can still get out of here with a balanced budget and have have the service improvements where we want to keep them, or the service levels where we want to keep them. So
Would council be open to me grabbing the keyboard and I can log what you identified?
Sure,
as
sure.
additions? That might be easiest.
Yeah. That would be my suggestion, just so we're kind of keeping track, and then we might come back to it if we need to, but,
But we're gonna go through all of these
Yeah.
fairly quickly, so we've already gone through the
Okay.
discussion. I know we've had this, our budget workshop for on multiple occasions, we've talked about
Yep.
what it is, so.
For the sake of discussion, is that, Marjorie, you said you spoke with Tanya. Does it seem like she's amenable to that, to the reduction in hours, or is she pretty hurt by that?
Well, everybody's hurt. And part of it is losing the payoff for the insurance if you opt out. That's part of the pain. But no, she is okay with 25 hours. However many years she's been with the city, which is way over 10. She actually started out with just a few hours a week in a position, worked up to 40. She's okay with 25. Because of her personal circumstances, she hasn't even made 40 hours a week for a little while. So in reality, we're operating 25 to 35 hours a week anyway. However, the other 15 hours is also when we have rentals at the facility on a weekend. Somebody has to go in there. So on a Thursday, she may need to stop at 2 o'clock so that she has 3 hours available on a Saturday. So there's more to just the facility than just what we do for the seniors. There's more to it than that kind of a thing. But she is amenable to it, but there's nothing to stop her from looking for a 40-hour-a-week job with benefits and things like that. So,
Understood. And not only that, I mean, think of it in any position. When you're used to making, X amount of dollars, and that's coming into your household, and now it's reduced fairly significantly, it just makes a big impact on your life. And you have to make decisions that, are best for you and your family.
The other thing is that, like you said, you talked to her and she might be okay, but on the weekends, when she normally would show up and do that, then somebody else is now going to have to take over that responsibility.
yes,
So-
we would have one of our rovers do that who also makes $12 an hour but doesn't have other
Yeah, I know.
other work
Yeah.
attached. Yes.
When you say she's
And
been,
and I would caution all of us here, just to be careful with respect to HR matters and discussing
Right.
particular
Yeah.
employees, because that's what we're getting into that conversation. But, did you want to add something else?
Well, I don't know that it hurts us to go 6 months with the 5,000. Maybe we take another look at this as we move on to the next budget year, and maybe we'll find that we have to eliminate some other things as we move
Could
along.
be.
And budgets are kind of living documents. We can look at it in a couple of months, we can look at it another quarter, we can do a couple of different
That's
things.
my suggestion, we'll just plot along, we'll log it, and then we'll come back to it.
Yeah,
Just as long as we're keeping
that
track of
sounds
what
good.
we're
I mean, I think she has had some limited hours now, and so there is a
But
factor
she's
already
geared,
involved.
she's geared back up to working her
But she's
40
geared
hours a
back
week.
up to 40. if
Uh,
we're having to pay some.
Councilmember Hamby, you had a final comment?
I was gonna ask that question, if she's been working reduced hours.
But she's geared back up.
All right.
Okay.
And let's just, for our own protection too, let's just refrain from trying to identify people,
And I apologize
yeah.
for that. I should have
All right.
put my
Thank you.
HR hat on.
Yeah.
I apologize.
And so, all right, we'll move forward. So is there a desire to retain the position at the 40-hour level and make use of reserve funds if necessary there? Is there a desire to do that? I would be willing to explore that and agree to that, considering that the cost for the entire year would be less than $10,500. So,
I would be willing to support that also, and based on the fact that she's been with us for over 10 years,
There we
and she
go.
has a lot of experience, and she's hung in there, through tough times, and.
Yes, she
well, let's refer to the position in
Oh,
itself.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
here I go
Yeah.
again,
The
I'm sorry.
position.
Yes,
All
okay.
right. Thank you.
I would support it,
I'm in
yes.
agreement.
All right. All right, so it sounds like you have some, can you agree with that?
Absolutely, and all I would say, as we work our way down, maybe there's another area we can.
Right. Okay. Next on the item list here is continued freezing of the Parks and Recreation Director position, including ongoing interim responsibilities for the Library Director. I would be in agreement with that. How does the rest of council feel?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah? Okay, so let's move forward.
We won't discuss personnel.
Reducing the number of school resource officers from 1 to 2 with total cost recovery from Brawley Union High School.
It's already in
Okay.
effect, so.
I'm in agreement.
So we're moving, is there any other, yeah? Okay. Recognizing the expiration of the 6-month temporary position of code enforcement officer in November 2018, there was some desire from Councilmember Hamby to continue with that position. Is there further?
I think this is worth some discussion. I personally would actually love to see this position, as it was suggested to begin with, to continue. And there's obvious benefits from it. As we work our way down, there's going to be some others that we weigh. I think there's some more compelling areas that we might discuss that we're probably not even thinking of, such as down the road. I'm going to have a little bit of heartburn over changes in employee benefits, which is going to be a huge chunk, right? Because you're talking about, once again, we're having discussion of a significant reduction to maybe a portion of our workforce that doesn't realize, the greatest amount of
Sure.
income levels, et cetera. So I think it's at least worth discussing. So all I would say is I'm willing to earmark it. We can come back to that.
Okay.
I would love to see it continue, so it's not about, what its value is as far as service. It's more about just dollars and cents and trying to balance this budget.
And the cost for this particular position, can you give us an idea?
I'm gonna have Shirley come forward. I don't have the numbers at my fingertips for code enforcement
The
officer.
not fully burdened rate is $21.53 since it has been a temporary 6 months. Affordable Care Act has not kicked in. If it's council's desire to move it forward on a temporary basis but indefinitely, it's gonna be subject to Affordable Care Act.
So the cost will go up.
Then what are we
Yes, sir.
looking at then, or just off the top of your head? It doesn't have to be.
Family of 2 with insurance is on the 75-25, $800 a month,
More.
Times 12.
times 12.
So I'll like to revisit it, but I'm not so sure that it's my priority for me. I mean, I think it's been an important position for the city, and I think he's done some good work, and I have no issue with the person in the position or anything else. I just think that it's not as necessary as some of the other things that we're looking at.
I have not had an opportunity to meet in depth with Gordon Gase, the Director of Development Services, but I do believe there has been some interest expressed by the planning technician to potentially address some code enforcement issues. And the capabilities are clear for letter writing and communication. I know it's not the same thing as having a code enforcement officer who's worked for the city, who's prior law enforcement, who knows how to deal in the field with all kinds of unusual circumstances. But I do think there are some methods that could be explored further if the financial commitment is not something the city can make long-term.
What about considering, even if we were to consider the code enforcement officer position, not for 6 months, but even a 90-day extension, that sort of thing? Is that something that we can look at?
I think we're here to take the council's direction, but really the struggle is
I
how to
understand.
have a balanced budget.
I understand.
So that's,
Yes, Gordon Gase, Development Services Director. But he's also said he wouldn't have any problem if he was cut to part-time. I don't know if that helps on any of the benefits for health insurance, stuff like that too, because he's just doing this just to pass time anyway. So
Sure.
he's not doing it for the paycheck
Sure.
necessarily. So he wouldn't mind having hours cut back, and we just utilize him as he's there as for the primary things.
Why don't we utilize them in that way, like on demand, because it's all
Yeah.
that we do, but it's not worked that way.
It's nonstop, and there are over 100 open issues currently, just so folks are aware.
Yeah.
But how long can we go without a code enforcement officer?
Yeah, at some point.
Since RDA was.
And how long has that been?
2012.
Yeah.
So from 2012 to 2018, 6 years.
And there may be multiple, and then at some point it's.
And then, you know, well, yeah, and it was, you know, we couldn't be proactive during that time. That's
Yeah.
why it was, you know, the last 6 months was just catching up, you know, kind of thing. So-
What's the
I think it's worth a consideration.
Yeah, why don't we look at earmarking that? I think there's a desire to try and keep that on board, and then let's move forward so we can get past these. The next-
It's just an option.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, it's certainly good
Can we
information.
just get clarification on if we were to consider going part-time with less hours, then we wouldn't have to face the issue of the benefits, is that correct?
Affordable Care Act kicks in if you hire full-time or in excess of 30 hours per week,
In excess
So
of
we
30
went
hours.
25.
or an average of 30 hours per week. Just keep in mind, temporaries, we don't pay holidays. They go without pay in those days. But it does not reduce it when you work 32 hours. If they work 30 hours or less, or more, they get Affordable Care
So
Act.
that's what you keep in mind, 30
And
hours.
25 is just a sweet number that makes sure that they maintain under 30 hours.
Thank you.
All right,
You're welcome.
thank you. Next is freezing of 4 vacant police officer positions as of January 1st, 2019. Any comments from council, observations, opinions, otherwise? I think the comment shared by Mayor Pro Tem Wharton was a good one. With respect to, you know, I know there'll likely always be vacant positions. I think we've only encountered one occasion for a very brief time where we had a fully staffed department, right? And so I'm not sure if, even if we were to freeze the positions, if, you know, that may impact us in a really negative way, so.
This won't put a stop to continued recruitment or going through that process of clearance.
One of the things we might do is say that we're gonna continue recruiting. We'll make decisions on the hiring of one officer each time it comes up. We have the continual recruitment going on. We're open to say one officer being hired, but not necessarily hiring. We could freeze 2 of those positions, and we could still keep recruiting for 2, and then we kind of look at, see how that process works its way out. It may send a signal that we're willing to save that money. If we leave them all 4 open, looks like we're gonna hire them, people will be applying accordingly, and then I think that does a disservice to some people out there. So I would like to see us do some modification of that if we could, and maybe also, you know, do free, we could, the only thing, is when we come back into council session, we can unfreeze positions at any time. And so as this budget moves along, if we see additional revenue come in, if we get grants, if we do different things, we may see an opportunity to hire additional police officers. That's the only thing.
I think for me, the traffic enforcement officer, it made a lot of sense only because, well, not only, I mean, they all are doing their part, but it made a lot of sense to me in the sense that, you know, money generated from citations, you know, the cost of responding to accidents because there's more of them. There's, you know, there's cost savings and there's money being generated from enforcement efforts, right? And so I think the number, Chief, if you could come up, please, and it's off the top of your head, I don't hold you to the numbers, but I know that there was a really significant drop in the amount of fines issued, citations issued, and so that had an impact on the money collected. Is that?
So I don't have the exact information on the amount of monies attributed to the traffic offender funds. What I can tell you, there's a direct correlation in lack of enforcement. We're about 50% under what our previous enforcement efforts have been over the previous year, and about 150% of what we were 4 or 5 years ago. And currently our overall traffic collisions are up over 100%, and our injury traffic collisions are up significantly.
And Chief, maybe several years back what you were saying was 150% less now. What was that dollar figure then? Do you know? More or less?
I don't have the dollar figure associated with the traffic offender funds in front of me.
But it was like, was it a few $100,000 at the time?
It's not a huge
It's
number.
not, we get a small percentage of traffic fines, more on municipal codes than we would on any type of a violation or anything like that. What we do see is the direct impact or the impact that the enforcement activities have on public safety. in terms
Public
of the reduction
safety and the use of
collisions.
And it's really using resources too, when somebody's responding, you know, multiple times, so.
Yes.
Very well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe on this one, Mr. Mayor and Council, my colleagues here, I would say, I think it's clear we've done budget review year after year, and we know that this is very valued, all of our public safety, no question, really all our departments, frankly. So this is not a comparison of who's more important, who's not. I think it's clear all these services, we're doing everything we can to preserve. So with that disclaimer kind of said, I think it's important. This is obviously an area where we can realize probably the most savings as well. It's obviously the most, for a good reason. It's a costly department, but also for good reason. It's a department that also has a unique ability to qualify us for funds that otherwise we wouldn't. And I know the chief is poised to balance that, as we're kind of coming into this. So my questions would be around a little bit along with what Councilmember Caltron was saying is, if we go in with the idea of freezing, I think the key here is that if we unfreeze one and we fill it, once again, we're back into the deficit spending or tapping in pretty heavy to the reserves. We should know what those dollars are, fully burdened, whatever.
I'm gonna give you some rough, I'm sorry to be distracted, but.
And I think the council's philosophy is always, it's easier to not have someone than to let somebody go. And I'm very thankful we're not looking at that and facing that. Obviously keeping not only who we have, but also we have the retainment issue. So we need to kind of keep the continuous hire. So maybe a strategy of we could not freeze one of the positions. If it does fill, when that officer presents themselves, that has to come to council and we have to figure out how we're going to fund that. Does that make sense? Or if we agree it's just going to come from the reserve, but just so it's a case by case, because if we do not freeze any of them and we're fortunate and we fill all four, we could be $500,000 out, in our brigade. That's the only thing I'm cautioning. So it's just at least knowing how we're going to offset, if the fact is we're going to not freeze or freeze. But I think there's like a middle ground where we can continue the hiring, continue the recruitment, and really if we get fortunate enough where we can fill the traffic position, for example, bring it to council, we vet it, so that we don't hold up the entire budget or go into this to where we can run well short again of our approved budget.
So that would mean that we're freezing three, but we're still continuing
If
to hire
that's
for
what
a
it takes,
potential of one,
or-
or we may be potentially going to hire more than one, but we have to.
It could be more than
as we
one.
move along.
It could be more than one, as obviously this is fluid and dynamic in terms of things can change, but I think affording us as council the ability to address that, as I think we do anyways, more or less on a case by case, but I think this is going to be budget sensitive.
Yeah, certainly. Any other opinions on this topic? It sounds like there's maybe some mixed opinions on it, but other opinions on this particular topic?
Are there restrictions on how the reserve can be used? I thought I had read somewhere that it can't be for new hires or for something like that. I don't know where I read that, but it doesn't make sense with what you said, that this is a council, a self-imposed reserve, and why we wouldn't be able to tap into that.
No, general fund
Unrestricted.
or unrestricted funds, so you can use them for whatever it is that you choose. Whether those are roadway improvements, salaries, equipment, whatever it is. So with respect though to this particular item, freezing 4 vacant police officers as proposed by our city manager, are you in agreement of freezing the 4 or any other variation of that? You're in agreement with Donnie's, so he would be in agreement with freezing 3 positions and having 1 open and then coming back? Can you explain that further?
It's a little gray, and I don't know if I'm doing a good job of it. What I'm suggesting is freezing or unfreezing aside, even take that off the table for a second.
Let's just
What
not
I'm
even talk
proposing
freeze,
is, we need to continue our staffing levels at minimum where we're at. We express that we do not wish as a council to fall below the 29. So if we get up to 33, that's full staffing. Whether it's 1 officer, 2, 3, 4, as there's 4 spots, we just need to know where the money's coming from. So if we're expecting, we want to fill 1, then just realize that's not in this budget assumption, so we need to figure out where we're making that, and it could just be the general fund reserve, and that's that. I would just caution that we keep going beyond that. It could get expensive. So that's why I'm just trying to find out what the fully burdened cost is. And then we haven't gotten through this whole thing yet, so
Yeah,
there
yeah,
might be
yeah,
some
yeah.
other areas. So I would maybe keep it at that to where which would address the traffic. I think a lot of that could be agreed upon. I also think our participation in these task force are of tremendous, again, value and importance. I think the chief articulated what it does is it could be a potential force multiplier, concentrated in enforcement and particular campaigns where we have things like, you know, gang enforcement, stuff like that crank up. And these are all things that burden our day-to-day patrol officers every day. So again, they all have value, and I think there's even some dollars attached to them. And Chief, you mentioned the task force. Can you be specific? There's kind of, that's where I think the public gets a little bit confused. There are different elements of the task force, different task force organizations, some federal, some local, correct?
Yes, sir. So there are 4 different task forces that we have been asked to participate in. Currently, we participate in 2 full-time, which is the Imperial Valley Border Enforcement Security Task Force, which is a Homeland Security Task Force, federal task force. That is partially funded to the tune of about $80,000 per year for our officer to participate. In addition, we receive the possibility of participating in asset sharing or asset forfeiture as currencies are seized as a result of drug proceeds or illicit activities.
That would just stop right there, just because you said something key, the 80,000, that's pretty important. So if we froze that position, even though we may have an officer placed there now, if we froze positions, let's say all 4, you'd have to pull that officer back, obviously to fulfill our fundamental duties here, right? In the city. And we would miss out on that $80,000. So think of it as, it's kind of, you know, in our terms, kind of a grant. Yeah, so something to consider also.
And I will say that any task force position that is funded is highly sought after because they're limited in number. So currently at that particular task force that I do best, we are one of 2 local agencies that participate, and I believe we are the only agency that receives any type of funding up to that nature for our involvement to cover just base salary or portion of fringe. Chooses to utilize that. In addition, there's overtime funds that are covered by certain funding sources throughout the federal government as well. So that's a benefit to us, aside from just the presence, the force multiplier, and then there's always the asset forfeiture aspect that can be very significant. So that's one of the task forces that we currently participate in. The other task force we participate in part-time, and it's the Homeland Security Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and that is a collateral duty for one of our detectives. And he participates 1 day a week, and he has ongoing communications with the task force throughout the week. That is a unfunded participation on our level, but it's something that has yielded some great cases here in the city of Brawley and had some really good impacts for our community. Again, that's 1 day that he participates outside of the office, and then any overtime associated with his involvement in that is fully funded by the task force. We also participate in the county narcotics task force, the Imperial County Narcotics Task Force. We have 1 officer assigned there, and we receive $80,000 a year in funding for that as well. In addition to that, we have the ability to receive certain funds for overtime that's accrued by that officer as part of the assignment there in the task force. We have limited asset sharing there, but it is in place. It's just not as global or not as large as some of the federal task force partners. So that's the 3 that we currently participate in. There's several others throughout the county. The next large one would be the Drug Enforcement Administration. Currently, that is not a funded position that's available to us. We have separated from that since October of 2017, and we've accrued a number of asset forfeiture monies as part of our involvement there, previous involvement there. But as we're not part of that organization, we are not continuing that going forward, so we're missing out on asset forfeiture opportunities from that involvement there.
But, I'm sorry, what is the reason that we're not involved in that one, you know?
Staffing. Limited staff?
I have a question for you. We have 4 positions vacant.
Yes,
Who
sir.
are you assigning to those task forces? And you don't have to give me names, but how do you assign to those task forces when you have 4 positions vacant? Do you have other officers that fill in on those task forces, or how does that work?
In terms of the Drug Enforcement Administration, for example?
No, not necessarily that one, but the ones that you're currently involved in. How are you covering yourself if you have 4 vacancies?
So currently, our staffing model allows us to participate with the staffing we have on hand. That's built into our average patrol shifts being 4 and 1, for 4 officers and a supervisor. That includes our 2 detectives. Those are above and beyond.
Okay.
So that our current staffing situation allows for that.
Okay.
Again, my fear would be is if we fell below the 29, then we have to start pulling people
That
back
would
from
be,
those
that
positions.
would produce a problem for you.
Exactly.
Quite-
And just to be open with the city council, we have 2 prospective law enforcement officers and backgrounds with us right now. I don't know how that's going to fall, but we also have a couple of our employees that are looking for employment opportunities outside of the valley. So there's always that give and take, and I just want to be above board with council on that as well.
Okay. That answers my question.
Very well.
All right.
And there's several other task forces that are seeking our involvement, but those are really the 4 main ones here in Carroll County that we are looking at this point in time.
So going back to the topic, I want to make sure that we're clear here on council with respect to freezing of 4 vacant police officer positions. What is the desire of council here, the majority of council?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the suggestion with, again, additional information here that we've received. Maybe we freeze 2 of the 4, but with the caveat, however I can phrase this to where if we're fortunate to get, again, we've had challenges even getting ourselves staffed up to these numbers. I still would say it needs to come before council if we get to the threshold of that extra 1 officer. Not that they're extra, these are current positions, right? And just make sure from a budget perspective, we know where the money's coming from. We know it's coming right now from this discussion, and it's going to be backed with the reserve fund. Then let's proceed. But I still think if we're realizing that the results of our past budget here, we're still struggling in areas, I would like the option as council to reconsider that commitment.
Right.
I think I would also like to add the caveat that we do not fall below 29 officers, and we may have to reconsider up to the 30 level at any given time throughout the course of this budget year. But for right now, we don't fall below the 29.
And right now, so you know, I would like to, you know, even keep it at that, considering that we have 28 police officers, that their 30th is a school officer or resource officer, right? So if we just consider the 29 and we look at 31 positions.
Sure.
And that way, we can look to try to continue funding that.
And these task force positions, as you just heard, they're partially, you know, there's a good portion that are funded, so it would be silly not to, you know, maintain that.
So just for clarification, so right now we have a fully funded 30, actually, the resource officers, and we have the 29. So if we had the 29 and then 2 other officers seem to qualify or one at a time, that would come back to council for approval before they're actually hired?
Yeah.
Well, I think once it's being proposed, because I don't want there to be too much delay in the recruitment process. We've done that in the past, and especially with police officers, it's a very involved process too. So I want to make sure that we don't burden the process and make it.
What will happen is our city manager, I think is important for her to know, is she going to build in that assumption or not build in that assumption? So that's why I'm saying, so if we build in the assumption, we still need the ability to address it budget-wise. This could be 6 months from now, it could be 4 months from now.
I mean, it's just a placeholder is all it is, you know, so, you know, it's not like this money's gonna be spent tomorrow. But in some instances, some of it may be. However, it's just a placeholder and seeing where the funding is gonna come from.
The nature of the recruitment process is it takes an extended period of time to get from recruitment to selection process to backgrounds. So finding the proper juncture where the council says we're comfortable with the move forward. If you say to us,
early on,
these are 2 that we're willing to consider, then we basically get the engine moving in a way that assumes those positions are a go, and they may or may not materialize in a match.
Right.
But
That's right.
In other words, if we're saying yes to this, they're gonna move forward with that selections process and recruitment process. It may or may not result in a match, so we may have a candidate that comes and is hired ultimately, or we may not, right? And so, but really, we're determining whether or not we're gonna put that placeholder, $150,000 in place right now. Is the council willing to do that? We have 29 police officers, we would go up to 31 positions. In addition, we would have the school resource officer that's being fully paid for by somebody else. So that's been expressed here. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
I'm personally, what Sam said initially, I'm a lot more comfortable with that simply because these are vacant positions currently. I understand that the, procurement of new employees takes some serious amount of time.
But we're understaffed as it is. So we should have 33 positions available. Right now, we're short 4. So what we would be saying at that point is that even though we're short 4, we would only fund 1. So in the event that, the reason I think Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Wharton has suggested too is because we know we've had fallout from other police officers where they leave for other agencies, and then it leaves us in a position to where we're going to be short-staffed even further. So again, I don't know if I think we're getting stuck on the issue of we're dedicating 2 additional officers and all things remain equal. There's so much fluctuation in the staffing levels that it's hard to say, and I think that's why there's greater comfort level in saying, let's have at least 2 officers. That would be my viewpoint.
And because it forces the chief to consider maybe our membership with some of those task force too. So that's the other thing. The math hasn't been fully, in this budget figured for if there is some funding to help offset some of those costs, maybe the fully burdened cost wouldn't be I don't know if you're going to compare them versus just not having that membership and that officer, part of those particular task force. So I think 2's safe, but I'm still throwing in the caveat that as a council that we're well aware before we get to the point of no return and background or whatever, that we have a position coming down the pipe.
If I may, I don't want to complicate it much further,
But you are going to?
but I'm going to, only because I'm having a hard time, because I said to you earlier that everything represents 6 months. The thing that's unusual about the vacant positions, that they're actually presented as a full year because they're vacant currently. So really what you're adding back in, and I don't mean to make it more complicated, is half of that number, because there's only half of this year that remains.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
So you're
Well, a
adding
little
half
bit more
of
than
this
half.
number or this total number?
This number represents 2 full-time permanents as
For
of
6.
July 1,
6.
2018. But we're already almost halfway through. I don't know if the intent is to land, if we think we're gonna land with any qualified candidates through the background process before December 2018 or not. But really, if it's not till January, then it's half of the figure.
It's half of that.
So we should probably put half of that figure up there.
Well, is
No,
it?
it's because our budget represents the full fiscal
Okay,
year.
yeah.
Yeah.
It represents the full fiscal year, but you're really in reality, they're
Yeah.
talking $75,000.
That's the thing about city budgets. It's
Yeah.
not like a realistic, real
That's
world. It's just its own
That's why they
universe.
call them living documents,
Yeah, no,
and
this
they
is
change
the-
constantly.
Divide it by 2 if chief gives me the signal that we're not hiring before January. I don't know where we are in process in detail on your officer prospects.
So the 2 that we currently have in background, one is pretty far along. We're held up only by a lack of response on some background documentation that's required from some of the references provided. My understanding is that individual is also in backgrounds with a city outside of the county and is gearing up to graduate from the police academy in December. So we don't have a commitment from that individual to move forward on his end, and I would not see any type of background being completed or any hiring taking place before January 1st for that particular individual.
Okay.
The other individual has just recently turned in the background package, so I would say that we're probably about 6 weeks out before we would have any ability to move forward. So again, I think we're looking at first part of January being a safe bet for those individuals.
So I think we can actually reasonably cut this number right
In
now.
half.
Okay.
So I think with that in mind, I think
Yeah.
we'll be okay.
Because that's
We're gonna
really,
make a decision.
realistically, that's what we would.
Let's make a decision so we can move forward. Yeah, if we're,
Okay.
if freezing 2, considering that number now has been reduced because we've
Yeah.
gone through the budget, would everybody be comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay, let's move forward, and that's the decision.
That's it. Keep a running total here.
Yes,
Yeah.
please. Thank you.
Okay.
It wasn't confusing, just clarifying. Thank you. All right, so next is freezing of 1 vacant part-time dispatcher position as of January 1st, 2019. Would we be in the same position, or how long has that position been open?
3 months.
3 months? So there's been some expense there.
If I may, Mayor,
Yes, please.
Shirley Benitez, Personnel and Risk Management. Since our part-time dispatcher moved to full-time approximately 3 months ago, roughly, so we haven't had a part-time for 3 months.
Okay.
We do have somebody in background, but we don't know if they're going to take a part-time position or not.
Okay. And we discussed it, I think, last time on the difficulty of getting somebody part-time, so.
There's difficulty with it, and also when we're in a pinch for personnel to cover, one thing I want to make sure council is aware of, that we do have the alternative of utilizing 2 of our existing personnel. One is a police officer who has prior dispatch experience with the city of Brawley, and another is our in a supervisory role, but is a former dispatcher. So we have some capacity. It's not ideal to bring those folks out of
Sure.
their other work duties into the dispatch center. Obviously, it's a higher cost.
Higher cost,
But if we are stuck, we still have backup opportunities within the organization with our personnel in place.
So we have somebody in background, not certain if they'll accept a part-time position. I really don't think there's any harm in continuing with the process. Just, if it's not filled, it's not paid. So, I mean, it's just one of those things. I know I've heard from Chief on the need for it, so. Is there any desire to, because once we freeze it, it makes it very difficult to move forward with anything for them. So it's just, it ties us up.
So that
With
represents
respect to
at a
the cost?
6-month level, $12,356 for 6 months. Okay, so I'm gonna say part-time.
Why don't we keep going on that one? I mean, I have a desire just to consider it and see where we're at. All right, let's try to get through these things here, everyone. Freezing of 1 vacant full-time fire marshal position as of December 2018. Is everyone in agreement with that recommendation?
Yes.
Yes? I am.
I am.
Yes. Luke?
Yeah.
All right. So freezing of part-time temporary staffing for janitor at administrative offices and maintenance worker at police department for a total of 20 hours. I would like to not freeze that position.
I agree. I agree. I think we need to keep some janitorial help.
I think it's very important for our maintaining, I mean, it's a limited number of hours and cost.
For both locations or one location?
It's only 20 hours per week.
20 hours per
It's
week.
10 and
Is
10,
that all
right?
it is?
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, I would for
A
both.
full 20 hours.
Yeah.
You guys use it, utilize it where you need it.
Yeah.
I don't want.
And that would come from the general fund, obviously, that expense. The next is holding on the hire of a temporary social media coordinator. I'm in agreement with that.
And you kind of said you.
And I'll do what I can to, promote any positive message that I can, and if the rest of the council can do the same, it would be
I think
useful.
Connie does a good job.
Yeah, he shows off his muscles and runs.
He's like.
He's doing
Whatever-
triathletes.
Whatever he is, he's
All
always
right.
running somewhere.
His Fitbit is left on flat. All right,
We're just being.
so cost recovery strategies, I think we're in favor of pursuing that, am I correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
change in employee benefits, the city aims to implement changes to employee benefits as of January 1st. Can you give us a little bit more background on that, Rosanna?
Yes.
I think there's some confusion amongst council, myself included, so.
Okay, so, as part of either our offerings as a place of work or the obligations of the Affordable Care Act, when we look at what that triggers in city-controlled policy, there is an option for any employee who meets, who is part of the permanent workforce or the temporary workforce per the Affordable Care Act to be eligible for benefits. Those benefits say that the affordability factor must be met for wherever they seek, whether it's the city of Brawley, a spouse, or elsewhere. If any employee presents verification that they have coverage, our current policy within our control states that the city will pay out a cash allowance. That cash allowance has major consequences for overtime rate calculations per the Flores versus San Gabriel case. It is staff's recommendation that we move forward with eliminating this cash in lieu of benefit for employees that don't have it as a right per the bargaining unit agreements, MOUs in place. And by moving forward with this change, it will result in a savings of $78,000 just for the portion of the year that represents January 1 to June 30.
For the unrepresented.
Correct.
That would be it.
Mr. Mayor, I would recommend that we, that for the sake of moving on in the discussion,
Can we-
note that and understand.
Let's note that, can we discuss that in closed session? No?
I have a question. Are these are literally cash payments? These are not deferred comp accounts that this money is going into?
I will have Shirley address the question of deferred comp, which is the arrangement for a select few.
Sure. But everyone else, other than the select few, it's
Cash.
It's money in their hand.
And I'll use myself as an example, maybe just for the ease. I have a spouse that has coverage. I provide evidence of coverage. I receive a cash benefit for the amount as though I was a beneficiary based on my household size, spouse plus 2. That amount that I take home as a financial benefit would no longer be available to me unless I was a participant. If I joined the medical plan, then I would be eligible for a 75-25 split.
Exactly. So, one group cannot take the cash. All other groups can. Employees can. It says in the resolution 2008-13 that if you want to opt out, you can provide proof of coverage and you get your specified in cash and taxed. So in my case, to use my example, I too opt out. I take my allowance, which I'm just me and my spouse, so 7/17/19. I back out whatever I decide to elect, dental, Aflac, etc. That comes off that allowance, so in essence, the city's paying for my Aflac. And then I take the remaining in cash as tax.
That's taxed.
That's taxed. Whatever cash is left over is taxed, not the benefit.
Not the benefit.
The benefit. So the money comes in as taxable wages on your paycheck stubs, and it comes out, if it comes out at all, it comes out by category. And some of those are pre-tax and some of those are not. The $78,000 that's referenced in the budget, in the proposed budget, is what is currently being paid out as a total allowance to these individuals.
That's the total. For
That's
the
the
870.
Unrepresented, which include temporary employees, the ones who are on Affordable Care Act. A majority of them do opt out because they have insurance somewhere else. So it's additional wages to them. And most of them is $871.60 per month. So it's sizable.
And that was actually,
How
as
did that
we-
come
that
about?
was council many years ago, prior to
Yes, sir.
Shirley.
Right.
You know, we-
90s,
yeah.
the 90s, right?
No,
It
no, that
was
was when I started,
2008. It was 2008, it was July 1st, 2008. The history, just a couple sentences of the history, my understanding is that the employees wanted to opt out, and that my predecessor said, no, you can't, you gotta be in CalPERS. The question was forced, CalPERS said, oh no, you don't have to take us. So that's when the council enacted the 2008-13 resolution to allow the employees to opt out. And then in that process, there was already a 3-tier allowance. It was employee only, employee plus 1, employee plus 2 or more. So when they opted out, saying I have insurance somewhere else, I don't want dual coverage, that particular family size, they would just say, okay, I'm just employed plus 2 more kids, then they got the 871.60. And recently, what we went through was a verification policy, so we can verify that household size. But before, it was just word of mouth and just went.
So what happens in the circumstances where the in lieu of benefit is paid into like a 350, retirement account?
All you're doing is taking the money as income and deferring it back out again. That's all you're doing.
No, but I'm saying with respect to this particular topic.
What the city manager's proposing, if I
Right.
may, is eliminating the opt-out provision.
And for those that use a different instrument, it would be implemented at the time of the last employee's in. So after we achieve the change with all the bargaining units.
If they agree.
So this particular benefit, it is a benefit, this particular benefit was enacted through a resolution by the city council. So
Not, the opt-out provision was.
Right.
The benefit existed a long time ago. When premiums were cheap, the city paid for the employee.
Right. When
Yes.
premiums were
But
cheap.
when premiums started
Yeah.
skyrocketing, they backed off and said, okay, here's an allowance.
Right, it was to the city's benefit.
2 bargaining units are still on allowance based. That means they get whatever their allowance is for that bargaining unit, and it differs between the 2 bargaining units. And they get to take that and buy insurance or opt out and take the cash.
Where it's become an issue is where we're having to pay overtime, or there's an overtime issue that's related to that, that's creating an issue for this?
It's the FLSA, the Federal Labor Standards Act, states that whenever you give money to an employee, you have to calculate it into the regular rate of pay. And that means a stipend, or if you get a percentage. Now, the allowance is an issue. When the finance director did a listserv, in other words, a question was sent out to all her people in her specialty, and was asked, all these cities were asked, what do you do? Very few give straight allowances what we do. They don't give some give like $1,500 and you do what you want with it. It's like a health savings account and you go and purchase whatever, but it's health related stuff. It's not cash. Then some say, oh, if they don't take our insurance, we'll just give them $100. Some say you take it or forget it.
I guess it could be a health savings account, right? I mean, if that option were available.
I don't know how the overtime calculation would, if it would be part of that overtime
How is it,
calculation.
but do they calculate overtime on a salaried employee?
No.
No. So somebody that's not receiving an hourly wage doesn't get that calculated in. Even if you do give them money, does it still count as an hourly wage when you give them money, or is that just part of their salary?
No. The reference to overtime is only to the
Hourly.
non-exempt or hourly
Yeah.
employees.
Hourly employee.
All right, I think that's clarification for everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any, so we're moving forward with the city manager's recommendation. I thank you for the clarity. Is any other
I have
concern? You do? Did you want to express those?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just feel that we're taking away a benefit that's there, that everybody depends on, that some of the households probably depend on quite a bit. And I think it's, until we get it decided what we're gonna do with the other bargaining units, I think this puts us into a position where we're punishing a certain element of the city and not necessarily doing that to the other bargaining units. Because we're not even sure that we're gonna get to that picture with the bargaining units.
I think given where our financial position is, the likelihood that we're going to impasse in the next cycle is an unfortunate reality.
I'm assuming that we will.
This will be
And
one
so-
of many
So then that
variables
just
in
pushes it forward in time, but we're actually putting that burden on the individuals right now, that we're gonna push forward to those other individuals for maybe a long period of time. It might take us a year to resolve the impasse.
So maybe another way to skin the cat is, would you be willing to consider $78,000 in reductions in some other part of the general fund cost center? If there isn't a stomach to make the change now, where is there a stomach to have a change?
But the 78,000 that you talked about doesn't necessarily get us there because we still have that outstanding thing with the bargaining units that we have to deal with.
It does get us there. That's the number for unrepresented individuals. If we rolled it out January 1 to
Or are
June
we
30.
willing to take it out?
For the purpose of the balanced budget, so I think it's just staying on task with the fact that if we don't take whatever recommendations we do not.
Yeah,
take,
we
it's
have
just
to
gonna
make
go
up,
somewhere else.
yeah, we have to just take it from somewhere else. I would agree with you.
Yeah, I have the same concern, because if we take this action, we're gonna be, basically, the unrepresented are paying the price for something that the represented, we may not be able to get that, passed. I mean, you know, it just depends on what happens with bargaining.
I think there, as mentioned, there could be some other implications too that
Yes.
we need to look at. I think it's even more than what we're discussing here, because it's not all understood to us, so. And with all that said, my recommendation at this point is, I know there's many more items, maybe we just cover the other items, we can come back, we can, you know.
Yeah, we
check
can
more
come back, but
expenses and-
I think I would be in favor of moving forward with it because it otherwise, we will have to pull from some other resource. And if this is the item that is of great concern because of potential litigation in other areas, then I think that there isn't very many options there. So, and it is in lieu of, so it's additional money they've been maybe accustomed to receiving, but it's not something that, should be an obligation. You see what I'm saying? It's just something that's been paid out. So, at any rate, I know it's a complicated topic. Let's move forward. We'll revisit this topic in just a minute. I do want to get past many of these others. The next one is temporary suspension of non-essential city contributions on an annual basis. I do would like to continue with some. In fact, I'd like to continue with most. However, I know, for example, Small Business Development Center, they did approach us for $10,000 initially, and we had the conversation with them. I think they are helping multiple businesses. I did have a conversation with Meredith today in the city of Brawley specifically, which is important. But if we can maybe consider a reduced amount, IVDC had been at a $10,000 level. They've been reduced. Small Business Development Center previously requested $10,000. That was for the inception to get it started. I would just propose something shorter, $5,000. The Film Commission had been, when we first started, I advocated for $10,000, then we reduced it to $5,000. I would still be in favor of having $2,500. And Khaled, that obviously stays. But if we did that, that would reduce it from an expenditure of $20,460 to about $13,000. So that would be reduced if we did that. I'm not sure what the rest of council has in mind, but IVDC, Small Business Development Center, and Film Commission all contribute in some form or fashion to economic vitality here within the city, whether that's through hotel room stays or that's through the grant funding that is being applied, or through the services that they provide to the businesses here in the city of Brawley. We have contributed the $10,000 towards the Chamber of Commerce. I know they're doing good work, but I still would like to see this moving forward. Anyway, those are that's my 2 cents.
Any other, Mr. Mayor, with that, and I would further say, as always, as many of these items in the future, and at maybe better times, we can almost go the other direction. But I think that's.
So was it half for each, Mayor Nava? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
It would be, I would remain at IBDC at the $5,000 level. We've been there. It had been $10,000. We'd reduced it significantly. Small Business Development Center, I'd propose $5,000. The Film Commission, I'd reduce it to $2,500. And Khaled at $460. Is there another suggestion by the council, or would you like to eliminate it, or like to remain? I just don't.
What did we used to give to the SBDC?
SBDC was it was a recent, that's been a recent contribution for us. So they came to us last year and asked for $10,000 just to get it started. And we were, I think, all in agreement with that. However, they are getting the work done and they're doing things. I just wouldn't be in favor of doing a $10,000 contribution this time around.
I might be in favor of about $2,500 for the other piece.
I suggested 5, okay. And they are considering that they are doing work specifically with businesses here in Brawley. So that is the one thing that, and they offer free services. So that's the other item. Any other suggestions?
Mr. Mayor, I also mentioned it, just I know that Meredith has been here to present, but what I do appreciate what SBDC does, not only their focus in Brawley, but the data to back it up with a number of meetings and I think touches, and they're very good at compiling that and presenting it with facts and evidence. So I would certainly be in support of the $5,000 suggestion, which is still a 50% cut from last year.
Any other suggestions?
My feeling behind this is if we're gonna make the cuts that we're gonna make, then all of these agencies have to experience some form of cut, period. I don't see any way around it. So I think with the SBDC, while I'm supportive of them, this was a one-time deal where they came in for $10,000, and I thought that was what they needed to get started, and then we wouldn't be asked to do that again, but we're being asked to do that again. I'm looking at, if we're gonna make cuts to employee benefits, if we're gonna make cuts to police officers, if we're gonna make cuts to these other things, then I think everybody has to experience a cut. I'm not saying we don't fund them with some portion of the funding, but I'm not willing to fund them with the same amounts that we've given them over the years if we're having to experience cuts, and that's just my feeling on it. I support all these agencies, I'm involved with all these agencies, and I understand their need, but I also understand the city of Brawley's need. And so I'm looking at, like, IBDC gets a cut, SBDC, maybe they get a large cut, maybe they do go down to 2,500. Film Commission, maybe they go half to 2,500. And then Cal Ed, if we want to leave that at $460, I don't necessarily have a problem, but I don't know what benefit
It's a
that brings.
subscription. Basically, it's a membership fee for the agency. We receive journals where they distribute white papers on topics.
Do we utilize that at all?
I have not participated in attending conferences. One of the big things that they do is offer conference opportunities, but it's very difficult to break away.
Could we forego that expense?
Could we eliminate that expense entirely?
It's proposed for a cut because these are difficult times.
Well,
and I don't think the disadvantage will be great to.
I think of these agencies, it's more of the council's desire to work with. I mean, Cal Ed is not something that council works with necessarily, right? So it would. So let's get back on track here. Cal Ed is, it's not something that's being proposed necessarily by council. It's just something that had been in place for many years. All right. So in order to help reduce some cost, I would still keep in mind we don't have an economic development arm. We don't have certain things, and we are using our limited resources to try to expand what we can. Right. So I just caution council in really making further reductions and for example, Small Business Development Center, I know that they're getting off the ground, they're providing some services. I still would try to provide some funding at $5,000, IBDC at $5,000, Film Commission at $2,500, and if we can reduce that Cal Ed even further to zero, that would put us at $12,500 as opposed to $20,460. So that's, in my opinion, a fairly significant reduction, and it still allows us to participate in the things that IBDC is doing. They've got grant money that they're able to focus, especially in our downtown area. I know that I'm working with them, and I'm working with the chamber very soon in the next 3 to 4 weeks on something to help revitalize not just downtown but Main Street and the city of Brawley as well. So I just want to make sure that we're sending the right message that we support them and we want them to help us within our business community, because we don't have those departments to be able to do that. I think that's a limited amount of funding, where we're gaining greater benefit than we're expending. So anyway, that's my final argument for it. So I would still propose 5, 2,500, and 0. Any other proposals? I know that you had an opinion there, Councilmember Couchman.
I'm saying 2,500 across the board, eliminate Cal Ed.
I'm in favor of that, Sam. I do realize that they do contribute some to our economy, but as painful as these cuts are going to be for city employees, unrepresented especially, it's just gonna be hard to justify that we're spending this amount, which is a small amount. It's a drop in the bucket of the whole general fund, I understand that, but when we're counting dollars, when employees are concerned, I'm with Sam. I think if we reduce it to 2,500 across the board and get rid of Khaled, I would be satisfied with that.
I think that's really important to consider as well. But I don't want any of us to misinterpret what I'm saying either. Because employees are certainly important, their pay is important, but what we lack, and we lack many things within the city of Brawley, what we're gaining for the limited amount of financing that we're providing is far greater than, this would require 1 or 2 employees, or at least 1.5 to do. So I just don't want to send the message that we're not willing to support organizations that are actually doing business in Brawley. Small Business Development Center, if we contributed $0, they would continue here. But what is that message? You see what I'm saying? It's just not, we can't just expect things for free. I've always said I don't work for free. I stopped doing that many years ago, and I don't expect any agency to work for free. If they're providing a service, and they do, that IVDC, SBDC, they've been very good at providing updated information on who they're working with and what they're doing. So again, I'm trying to share more of the information that's been shared with me. I'm sure it's been shared with you as well. But they're actually out there interviewing businesses, doing the work. I've just developed a business in downtown Brawley. I know how expensive that is. I've invested over $250,000 of my money and loaned money, and I have to pay it back somehow. So I certainly appreciate what they're doing, and I would just encourage you all to see that there is separation between employee pay and what we're contributing to. And these are organizations that are committed to making improvement. I'm also meeting with, thanks to IVDC, with a mining company that's coming into the Imperial County. I'm meeting with them on Tuesday. So again, those are the things that they're bringing here. They've already purchased land. We're hopefully getting them some office space in the city of Brawley. So those are the types of things that they're bringing here. And when we send the wrong message and saying that, well, we like what you're doing, but do it for free or do it for a really reduced amount, I think that sends the wrong message. But anyway, if that's a desire of council, so be it.
Mr. Ray,
I'm
still in support of your proposed numbers. They still reflect cuts, and they also reflect cuts that occurred last year as well. So these are continuous cuts. And if you want to put $2,500 in perspective, honestly, look at the next item below, and when you keep going, there are areas there where if we operate a couple days more efficient, or we do a little cost recovery, we're talking about, I think there's a significant return on investment if you're looking at $2,500. Is there a significant return on investment if we were investing, hundreds of thousands? Maybe not. But I think, to the mayor's point, just because I think we're making the symbolic cuts. I agree with you, with all my council members on that. I think we're just arguing over $2,500. So I'm just stating if we need to go to a vote, we can do that. But if you want to call for that, Mr. Mayor, but I'm for the numbers you proposed.
Yeah. So, desire of council, what is it desire? We'll just go one by one.
I think there should be some cuts there. I don't know if we have to come to a compromise, but I guess I would be willing to bump it up to 3,000, 3,000, and 2,000 or 2,500 to film commission. Interested to hear what Norman and Sam have to say.
Well, I think would make the statement about the SBDC. I would propose for us to contribute $2,500 to the SBDC. The Film Commission, you already said $2,500, and CalEd, we can go to 0. IBEDC, based on what you're saying, we don't have an economic development arm here with the city. I would like to see actually, and maybe I just don't see a lot of activity, but because we are reducing all of them, maybe we could reduce that one to 4,000, and I'm willing to do that, just to show that we're being, across the board, we're reducing all our allocations and going down to 4,000 for IBEDC, 2,500 for the SBDC, 2,500 for Film Commission. That would be my proposal.
But there has to be an argument behind these things. I know you guys are making, saying 2,500 or 5,000 or whatever it is. Why? Why SBDC, for example, if they're the ones touching 13 businesses or 18 businesses in the city of Brawley, they're the ones doing the work there, there has to be some justification for it too. Why would Film Commission get 2,500 then? You see what I'm saying? There has to be some sort of, thought behind that too. Because, Film Commission, when it first came on board, I was in favor of helping support it, just like I did Small Business Development Center at the $10,000 level. It has been reduced to $5,000, and that's what I'm proposing for Small Business Development Center. Film Commission, I think, is instrumental in gaining some momentum with hotel rooms here being occupied and filming. But, if we just start reducing without any sort of insight into the reason why we're reducing, why should Film Commission get the same amount of money as Small Business Development Center? I wouldn't make that argument, So let's just go across the board so we can tally this up and make a vote and we can move forward. So Luke, you're proposing, again?
3, 3, and 2.
3, 3, and 2. Norma?
I said 4, 2,500, 2,500.
All right. And Sam?
I'm more in favor of the 3, 3, and maybe 2,500 for the film commission.
Okay. Myself, I'm still at the 5, 5, and 25.
I'm the same though.
And that's, so it doesn't look like there's full agreement there. Is there a proposal by anyone to see if we can get past this item? Because it's not, nobody's really agreeing.
Maybe I would like to see just a brief report
I
from
was gonna ask that
IBEDC and SBDC on what they've done, even just in the last this fiscal year for the city of Brawley.
I think they presented that at their annual dinner and other things that they've done, but yeah, I mean, and Small Business
Is that
Development
part of
Center
it?
came as well, and they presented, and Film Commission has come and presented before us, and I'm not sure what else is gonna, we can't have them, here for $2,500. I mean, come on, let's just decide this.
report, I think.
It's
No,
not
but I
written
think we
report
can
that we
decide
have
as
access
council
to.
members, whatever it is, we can just decide it right now. We're not gonna call people in, give us a full report on everything that you're doing for a $2,500 contribution. Come on. I've spent more than that at Home Depot in one day for a refrigerator and some other things. Let's not, come on.
But it would be nice in the future just to see, what the.
And they do, they provide that. They
Meredith
provide-
was here and gave a
Yeah,
full
I
presentation.
recall that,
Yeah.
but I mean, like, a biannual or whatever, every 6-month report as to what they're
Sure.
providing. in
So let's
services.
move past this item, and otherwise, we're gonna remain here. Now, Luke, you proposed a $100,000 contribution towards the Brawley Chamber of Commerce with the city transit occupancy tax. I think that was 33% of what they were requesting. Is that still, are you still in favor of doing that?
I think in light of what we have in front of us, that it's probably not realistic this year.
I agree.
I think you had made a proposal as well, Norma?
I had made a proposal to increase it to 20,000. I believe that was my proposal.
Okay. Are you still in favor of doing that?
Well, in view of the situation we have, no, I would just leave it at what it is,
Okay.
10,000.
And Sam,
I think I would have to go along with
which is?
the 10,000.
Okay.
We've already given that to them, actually, that's already been
Mhm.
figured into the budget.
Sure.
Itself, now whether we continue that or not, that's something for another discussion
Right.
probably. But I think, I think we're all in favor of that. If we do see increased revenues, I probably would be interested in increasing their revenues a small amount. I'm certainly not willing to give them 45% of the TOT, as I've made clear before. I certainly am willing to listen to reason to give an additional amount to the chamber. In fact, I'd probably be willing to take the money away from these other organizations that are not in the Brawley area specifically and give that to the chamber. However, I think that's for another discussion and not for tonight, so.
I think you'd fight opposition.
Oh, I'm sure I would. I'm sure I would.
Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Wharton?
And I think I echoed, when this topic first came before us, that I guess with a little bit of my experience on council, I knew at that time that this was going to be a struggle, so it was a tall order. I appreciated the chamber for coming forward. Again, it's an idea, it's innovative, it's maybe done in certain areas, but I knew myself personally going into this budget season, this was going to be a very, very tall order and ask, so I'm in favor of where we're at, where we stand now with our contribution of 10,000 that's been made.
Okay, and I would be in agreement there. So, the general fund reserve use, we have a 15% policy, and we're in agreement that we would reduce that amount to whatever it is, reserve, well, whatever it is that we end up using, make
So
that
I'll
adjustment.
calculate it before, and then your reso, when you are ready
Okay.
to adopt,
Whatever
will
that
reflect
percentage is.
Okay.
whatever changes
Still gotta
plus,
go back to
yeah.
it.
All right, so let's go back to a couple of items. Code enforcement officer, what are we doing here? What is the desire? We'll go down the board. We'll start with Councilmember Hamby.
If the code enforcement officer has indicated he would be willing to go to part-time, I think that's a good compromise. We still get some code enforcement in on the backlog, but not at the rate that we're used to paying for the last 6 months.
So what's your proposal? Continue?
Half-time, yeah, continue, but at part-time, I don't know if that's 25 hours.
Under 30.
20
Yeah, under
hours.
30.
Under 30 hours.
If we're trying to avoid Affordable Care Act implications in the future, the safe zone is 25 or less.
Okay, then 25.
So set it for 25, if I could have some help with calcs.
We could go to 20, I mean.
I'd like to go to
Norma
20
suggested
hours.
20, I don't really have a
Half-time.
problem between the 20 and 25.
I think you could get credit.
Well, let's see what the cost is first, and then we can
Yeah.
determine whatever it is that we're gonna do.
This way, 20, and then I need to change this amount. Let me see what the first number is, and then I'll get it second.
That gives us some closing.
Yeah, we do that.
Especially one of those trailers people are, take them out of the garbage.
That amount is the anticipated for 9.34, okay.
The RVs, I think that's and the chickens, now chickens are becoming
15% for
Just, err on the side of caution there and just,
divided by
While she's calculating, we still have
now, as she's calculating that, we'll go down the line here as far as we already talked about cost recovery strategies. We're in favor of moving forward with that. Changes in employee benefits, the desire of council on that. We'll go down the line. Councilmember Hamby.
Going back to what you said about the fact that it is in lieu of, it's a benefit that's available. It's difficult as it is to make that cut. I think, I guess the only thing that would really cause me to hesitate is if there's the idea that when it comes to negotiating, that this may not happen with those that are represented. We would then have to go back and make things fair across the board.
Well, it would come, if it goes down, it has to come to us, and we decide. So it'd be in our hands. So.
And do we know what the timeline is for reaching those, the negotiations with those bargaining groups?
As soon as we're finished with the budget approval process, the new year will begin with management initiating contact if we're not contacted prior by our bargaining units. All of our bargaining units MOUs are scheduled to expire June 30, 2019. So typically it takes 90 to 180 days to get across the finish line. We'll be working through many, many topics that have financial consequence to the city. And anything that we're not spending today is something that will be part of, I'm sure, the compensation requests of the bargaining units.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, well, then
at this point in favor of eliminating that cash in lieu of provision.
Okay, so you're in favor of moving forward with the city manager's recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Kestner, how do you?
Well, my only concern, like I expressed earlier, is that because the action would be taken with the non-represented, it just didn't seem fair, but, I mean, life isn't fair, I guess, so we may end up, like I said, come to an impasse, I will have to make a tough decision then for everybody, but.
Well, this is just for those particular, the ones that are unrepresented though.
Right. And so there's no legal repercussions that we might face if we do this one?
Not at this stage. We'll be happy to discuss with you in closed session any elements that are potentially in play.
Okay. I'll go move forward.
All right. Councilmember Couchman?
Well, I have extreme reservations. I'm willing to move forward with the council on this. I have some extreme reservations about this and some of the things that we're doing. However, I will agree with the council on this decision.
Okay. With respect to your extreme reservations, what are those, Councilmember
I think
Couchman?
it's unfair for the unrepresented to take it away without us having an overall look at everybody within the city. I think it's a benefit. They've received it for many, many years, and now we're removing it just on a very short notice. And I think people have to adjust to that. I don't think it's in our best interest. I think morale and other things will suffer, and I believe that it will not be in our best interest. And honestly, I think there's a lot of things that have to be decided first, but however, I'm going to go along with the council.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Wharton?
City manager's recommendation.
And I'm in agreement as well. So that's 5-0. So that's direction. And back to the funding for the IBDC, Small Business Development Center, Film Commission. So there's various proposals, and we can go through this again. Is there a different proposal to see if we can find a ground here where we can agree to, so we can move forward?
I tried to track the individual concepts proposed by council. It appears that the closest area for consensus, if Councilmember Kastner Howdicky were willing to reduce IBDC to 3 and raise SBDC to 3, with the Film Commission at 2,500, there would be at least 3 people that generally agree.
Okay, what are the dollar figures, let's see?
So Luke, Mr. Hamby's concept was 3, 3, and 2. 3,000, 3,000, and 2,000, and I'm sorry if I haven't gotten it correct, but this is what I've written down. Kastner Howdicky is 4, 25, and 25. Councilmember Couchman is 3, 3, and 2,500. Councilmember Nava and Mayor Pro Tem Wharton are 5, 5, and 25. There appears to be a difference in 2 areas actually between Norma and Luke. It's 3 for the SBDC for Mr. Hamby's recommendation, 2,500 for Norma, and 2 for Film Commission and 2,500 for Norma.
Look, the total amounts are 8,000 by Councilmember Hamby, 9,000 by Councilmember Howdicky, if I'm correct in this. 8,500 by Councilmember Couchman, 12,500 Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Wharton, 12,500 by myself. If we could agree to say 10,000, here's a proposal for you all. 5,000 for IBDC, 3,000 for Small Business Development Center, and 2,000 for the Film Commission. And of course, CalEd would be eliminated. That would put us at 10,000. That's a reduction in my proposal, slight increase in some of your proposals. but that would meet us essentially about halfway. Would that be something you'd consider?
I can go along with that.
Okay, so there's,
I'll agree to that.
all right, so there we go. We have full agreement there? All right, perfect. Good, we'll move on, thank you.
3,000 plus agreed two. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. This number goes to 1, 2, 849, 26.
So we're in agreement that what we've proposed, the difference between what our city manager proposed and what we've proposed is coming from our general fund reserve. And so, although these numbers are not completely finalized, it's going to be somewhere in the ballpark of $122,849.
For 6 months.
26 cents for 6 months.
Is that correct?
For the remaining
The
part
remainder, the
of the
latest-
fiscal period.
right.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah, this is.
Which
this
is
for the
nearly
remainder.
6 months.
The only thing that might have a factor here, and just to bring that up, is the 2 police officer positions, which might not get hired or something along that line. We could save some substantial money there.
And I've also omitted 1 month out of the code enforcement officer, we didn't count December.
Okay,
But-
so it's
we'll
gonna be a
fine-tune.
figure
fine.
fine-tuned, it's off by a few thousand dollars.
Not too bad.
All right, so that is direction from the city council to the city manager with respect to, and thank you very much for your patience. I know sometimes it's long and tiresome, a little contentious, but I appreciate everybody's patience, thank you. Let's move on.
So there's a resolution for action?
Okay, there's a resolution, I propose adopting the resolution with the proposal presented by city council to the city manager, reflecting changes, and do I have to read the resolution?
There are 3 changes to the item that is in the backup. One, it should reference fiscal year 18-19.
Okay,
Under the passed and approved and adopted, it should note that this is a special meeting of the Brawley City Council.
okay,
And once we calculate the actual number known, the
It'll be
exception, I'll put in the actual percentage amount.
okay, so I make a motion to approve the resolution as, with the changes outlined by our city manager, changing the fiscal year period on the backup material to 2018, 2019. It was, this motion is being made at a special meeting of the Brawley City Council, and the finalized figures will be included in the resolution once presented and ready for signature.
I'll
So-
second that.
Okay. That's a long resolution.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
I'll
thank
change
you.
it.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, thank you. Let's just move on so we can get past this. Thank you very much, everybody at Finance and City Manager's Office and our department heads. I know it was a lot of work to consider. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, let's go through these. Regular business discussion, potential action to authorize a professional engineering services agreement with Lee and Rowe for a value not to exceed $29,876 for compliance with statewide trash provisions for Track 1 implementation plan. The backup materials on pages 48 through 65. Are there any questions from City Council on this particular topic? I would like to make a motion to approve it. Is there any questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, I read the backup material. I'd like to second that motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion. Somebody seconded that? Okay. Any further discussion or questions by council? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 4C, discussion action to approve purchase of 2 riding mowers and attachments from Powerline Equipment for amount not to exceed $61,902.42 in development impact fees. My only question to this before your presentation is with respect to the use of developer impact fees, can they be used for this equipment?
This particular purchase is specifically named in the needs list.
Okay.
We did have an inquiry, and we.
Right, there was an inquiry today.
Consistent with our justifications.
And they asked for that backup material, and it is in the needs list.
Yes,
Okay, very good.
specific.
Okay, very good. Go ahead.
One question, maybe Marjo or you can
Yeah.
answer. I had a constituency talk
a constituent called me and talked to me about this, and they were concerned about why we don't buy these locally. And I didn't have the total explanation for them. I think it's because we buy under a special agreement. We get them at a very reduced rate. It's possible that the locals can't meet that price. I don't even know that the equipment is available locally, and that was kind of the question that I had. Is this equipment available locally, or do we do this in a different way just so that we can save this money?
It is available locally. The reason we didn't go that route is because we'd have to get in line to procure, and the time associated with procuring and meeting the requirements for a solicited bid would delay us by at least 60 to 90 days. There is an immediate need. We did attempt to gather information from local vendors, which is very likely what maybe kicked off the contract.
Maybe that kicked it off.
We would love to work with our local vendors, but our procurement procedures leave us with two options. We run a procurement process and follow all the requirements that are associated with it, or we look at piggyback. And the piggyback option, you'll see us use it whenever we can, because preferred pricing that's in place for an agency that gets something really large, there's an opportunity for us to have the same pricing honored.
Okay.
And
So-
it's served us well in the past. The other thing is, by going through our stated procurement process, it's not necessarily guaranteed that a local
Correct.
bidder would win.
Would win, they probably
Still-
wouldn't based upon price, and then if we wait 6 months to get it, we can't afford to wait.
I think having said that, we take advantage as much as we can to shop and buy local,
Yes.
every opportunity that I've seen.
I've got you. I just need to be able to give them an explanation. They may not be happy with that, but I will give them the explanation.
All right. So, having said that, is there a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
And
Nick?
I would like to say that we did go local first, and it is an RDO company that's national. And after we found that the one place that we selected had this pricing, we contacted the local RDO to see if they were eligible to use that piggyback price, and the answer was no. Also, what they have available locally are 2018s, and the ones that we're ordering are 2019s.
Okay.
And any more info, I'm very happy to go over what we
Does
did.
it have rims on it?
Well, you know what, we might be able to do that, except we don't have, maybe they'll paint flames on the side.
That's,
we
that's
race?
good.
Yeah, and
Can we
racing
race
would
them?
be good with two of them, that would be fun. I get to
All
drive
right.
one, which means the other person would win, but yes.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Next up is an update on State Highway 86 road rehabilitation project activities from December 2018 to January 2019.
Happy news.
Yeah, it's good news.
Yes.
They're by Guillermo Cias, Public Works Director. Director.
Wake up, wake up.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Guillermo Sillas, Public Works Director. This is a project that will be performed along the Highway 86 from approximately I Street to Main Street and along the Route 86/78 from the same Highway 86 or First Avenue to the western city limits and beyond that. This project will be performed by Caltrans in conjunction with another section on Westmoreland. And they will start working, they were scheduled to work before, but due to the Caracol festivities, so they temporarily suspended the work along Main Street, and they will resume on December 3rd. Approximately, the heavy work will be done until December 20th, so from December 3rd to the 20th, and then they will come back December 26th and 27th, and finally from January 2nd to January 4th. So this project will be pretty much grind or asphalt removal and overlay with striping, and they will be performed in similar way to the Highway 111 that was south of I-8. So they will be doing lanes at a time, so there will be always access to businesses and for circulation. We will be in coordination, or they will be in coordination with us, so we will be updating. Probably it will be very quick, it's a quick job. But any questions that you have?
Any questions from council? No, I know that the work is taking place, so it is a big project, and it's going to cause some disruption for sure, but any other questions or comments from council?
The good news is that this roadway work, along with a project we'll be hopefully bringing to you for award in the not-so-distant future, we'll have a lot of roadway in progress, I guess, for rehabilitation and improvement, and hopefully it brings and achieves much-needed change that benefits all of the travelers through.
At one time, they did that improvement over on 86 from Brawley. Yeah, that was like the weirdest, awful, I complained about that, is like you going through a wind tunnel is like, you know, just so loud, you know? It was crazy. I don't know what they used there, but sounded like you were on the moon or something. I don't know what it sounded like.
I do anticipate once the Highway 86 work is complete, that it's very likely that the topic of relinquishment is heading back to center stage with the city of Brawley.
All right. Well, I don't know if we have an option.
I know,
So.
probably don't.
All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Director Cias. City council member reports. We'll start with council member Hamby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended quite a few of the cattle call events, as I'm sure all of you did and will report on. I got to attend a couple of ribbon cutting ceremonies for some new businesses, including Mayor George Nava's new commercial real estate venture. And today attended O'Malley's reopening. Now they're a plumbing supply house instead of doing plumbing service work. And I had a personal interest in that because I buy a lot of plumbing parts. So it was very impressive to see what's offered there now. I received some community concerns regarding code enforcement downtown, and I don't know what the ability is to get an update on code enforcement activities with regard to abandoned buildings downtown, but I don't know if that's part of a report that's forthcoming, or if that can be publicly stated, or if there's ongoing paperwork that has to remain private. But anyway, those are some of the concerns that were brought to me, and that's it for my report.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Kastner, how did you?
Okay, well, I too attended numerous of the cattle call events this year. They were all very well attended, outstanding. I can't say that I liked any one more than the other. I think I had a good time at all of them. And I also attended your grand opening, which was also very nice. I was very impressed with your building there.
Thank you.
And wish you much success.
Thank you very much.
And I was able to come to the Veterans Day event here in front of our city offices, and we welcomed the veterans that were walking from Westmoreland, and just kind of hung out with them out there for a little bit, and then they went off to the American Legion to have lunch. So that was nice. And then I also attended the Honey Festival in Westmoreland on Saturday. That was a nice event. I usually try to make it to Westmoreland, and I hadn't made it in the past few years, so this year I was able to attend. And
was it a sweet event?
It was a sweet event. I stocked up on I stocked up on our honey, and I have to
That's
say,
a sticky situation there.
I have to say that of course, you know, our city is much larger than Westmoreland, but it's really nice to see that small city, everybody that lives there supports that event. I think almost everybody that lives there was out there, and so it was really exciting. And I also attended the O'Malley's, what was it, like an expansion, remodeling, whatever, today also, and I think my husband was really excited about that one too. I think he likes plumbing stuff. So that's my report.
I think
Thank
you liked it more than he did, because you were like, he needs to put sprinklers in, he needs to do this. And I was like, that poor Hitler doesn't even know what he walked himself into.
He's not a landscaper. I keep telling him, and he doesn't like to hear that. But.
Yeah, well, that's one way of not doing it, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not like
He's
this
a
kid.
jack of much trades, but
Yeah.
that one is a
Jack of many.
one that he excels in.
Councilmember Couchman?
Yes, cowboy poetry, mariachi festival, rodeo, the parade, the rodeo committee dinner. I also attended Mayor George Nava's grand opening of his office, a very nice
Thank you
office.
very much.
I attended Philanthropy Day on behalf of the Rotary at Brawley, over in El Centro at Old Eucalyptus. Very nice, and several Brawley residents were honored at that for their contributions to our community. I attended the IBEDC dinner at the Elks Lodge, and that was a well-attended dinner. It's a very nice event up on the roof. You can look out across Brawley, and we don't have events up there that often, but I think in the future they'll be having more. Also attended the Veterans event, although I got there a little bit at the tail end. They had already left, and so we took some pictures, and we had some people that did show up, and so we had a nice time with that. Kind of subdued over past year's events, and so maybe that'll be better next year, and we'll bring some of that back with the wall and things of that nature. Other than that, that's what I have to report. I would like to mention city employees did a great job during the cattle call festivities. They were out there in force. They did good. I got compliments from people on the cleanup on Main Street and other areas, and I think that's due to the chamber also and their activities and their progress there. And then the Explorer Scouts from the police were down directing traffic, and they did a fine job, very, very well organized and very well done. And so, just with that, I'd like to thank all the city employees for all of their contributions during the cattle call time period.
Very well. Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of the cattle call events, as mentioned, and I'll just echo again what Councilmember Couchman said, just very well executed and done. And as always, our chamber, I know their tireless effort in helping to bring many of those events, as well as obviously city staff and numerous volunteers that helped to bring all of the various events. So again, another very successful year, and I think we all noticed also Mother Nature cooperated. We had phenomenal weather really for cattle calls. So I think
It was great.
that certainly helped out a lot of the events. The only one I want to highlight is only just selfishly, I did participate for the very first time the VUHS Wrestling 5K that took place downtown. My excuse for usually not attending something like that, A, I didn't run, B, I didn't get up that early on Saturday morning. Usually I was lucky to make it to the parade. This year I did all the above, and what an experience to run down a secured, closed, shut down Main Street. So it was a very unique experience. Not many of us, or people do it, I think. It's about 20 participants, but got to run basically from the Plaza Park area right down Main Street all the way down west to the west end of town by the Shell station, turn around and then run as hard as you can all the way down to Brawley Tractor Supply, going right down to downtown core. And with the parade crowd starting to kind of form at that time of day for those that want to get there early, including I think some of my fellow council members yelling, heckling, whatever. It was quite the experience, and I set a personal best record, so it was pretty cool.
Awesome, good for you.
Right here on Main Street, thank you very
I've
much.
seen some guys on D Street do it pretty well.
Yeah, usually you're running from somebody, right, Chief? With all, I'm going to point out that at the time also, one of our officers, not only with a fellow deputy or member of the Sheriff's Department, ran in full uniform. So, and we're not very far behind, so very impressive if I can single out Sergeant Blackstone.
Yeah, he always does it. Now it's his way of showing off.
Yeah.
Now it's like,
You mentioned something about the chief.
Not even
We're
breathing,
going to be joining this team next year. So.
If I may, Sergeant Blackstone also on Saturday won the wild horse competition and rode the horse across the line in the rodeo.
we don't want
along with
any
everything else.
We don't want
Yeah, I know. I already told him.
That was discussed.
Yeah,
That was discussed.
Yeah.
And he is on video.
Yeah,
I was like, no, I did this with no.
Mr. Mayor, other than Cavco, I do want to point out I got to participate in the video that was shot and placed on our own personal social media at the Brawley Meat Market, and I think that's a great example of some things to come amongst all of us on council to participate in. So I think that went really well, and I appreciate the mayor. We just happened to be at the right place at the right time because we were coming by for a meeting, and that took place. So. Again, I just want to point out it was obviously very successful, and I look forward to doing more of that.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mentioned it to council members that's going to be the effort that I make. So is that your, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
No,
That's
thank
it.
you very much.
Thank you.
So thank you all very much, council members, for attending, city manager and others for attending my grand opening here in Brawley, and something I'm very proud of, and put a lot of time, energy, effort into it. And so I've been able to work now a little bit and make some headway, and I'm excited about 2019. I think it's going to be a phenomenal year. So it's just I'm focused in on a niche that I think is not being offered here locally, and I think it's going to be very good. So I'm excited. I just need to get past this year. I think, Bill, come on over. I don't think you've seen the office yet, but please come over and check it out. But always welcome anybody to swing by and check it out and have a drink. There's plenty to drink there. So. At any rate, thank you all very much for coming out here. And Catacall events were fantastic. Chamber did a very good job. I think, and I spoke to Katie about it, I think maybe the attendance is down overall for many of the events, and she had mentioned that to me. And it looked that way for some of them, that it was a little bit more subdued. And it could just be, there's some fatigue out there. There's a lot going on, a lot of events, and whether it's football, sports, out-of-town events, and things of that nature, it just could be that. But, it still was a very, very successful time for the community and for the chamber, and I had a very good time. I attended many of the events out there, and people seem to be having a lot of fun. So that's always important. I had a great time at my own grand opening, and I appreciate everybody supporting that. And I was able to now that I'm not doing that sort of the work and repair of the building anymore, and I'm focused in on my business. I have a little bit more time of what I used to do, which is a lot more engagement in the business community and being out there. So that's one thing that I do want to focus my energy on over the next 12 months. And really beyond that is just kind of having some conversations, very brief conversations with local business owners and what they're doing. And, there's just so much development and improvement. I think oftentimes people focus in on the 500 and 600 block of Main Street, and they think that dictates all of Brawley, and it doesn't, We have, if you look at just Main Street improvements, right? I mean, you look at all of the millions of dollars that have been invested from all the way from pilot to, the motel. Yeah, all that. I mean, there's just millions and millions of dollars of improvement. So, that and everything else that's, taking place, I can see that they probably spent several $100,000 in improving Jim O'Malley's place, just from what it looked like before to what it is today. I know that's expensive. So, that's another big investment. And so, it's employing 3 people, and it keeps that place open. And now it's a supply house for other people that use it. I happen to use those things. And it's a great place for me and others to go. Instead of going to El Centro or Lowe's or Home Depot, I mean, what I would be looking for is there. So it's and everything's nice and organized, and they're helpful, and they know what they're talking about, and that's cool stuff. So anyway, continue to support local business. Eddie over at the meat market. If you haven't tried it this week, it's $4.99 a pound, right? For tri-tip. I bought some, and it's delicious. It really is. So try that out. Give him a shot. Help him out. Yeah. No, but seriously, I mean, the pollo and the carne and everything that he has out there is just supporting a little business. And if each of us spends a few bucks here, it's going to help. And the funny thing is, he told me that, he's like, George, he's like, a lot of people have come in and they mentioned the video. I was like, so that works. He's like, people are buying it, and then people are actually posting pictures of them buying it, so that's cool. Why not, right?
I went last night.
Right, see, I mean, it works, so people are spending some money, and that's cool. I think it's, anyway, enough of my rambling. Thank you all very much for your patience and for all the work that you're doing. And, let's have a great week. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you, and be safe, have a good time, stay out of trouble. That's important, right, Chief? Yeah.
Just ruined the holiday.
I know, right? Yeah, right. All right, city manager's report.
I have a couple items before I hit on the Lauderdale Ranch topic. First, I want to let council know that staff and I have begun meeting with various stakeholders on the Catacall 2018 series of events. I do expect we may have what just occurred and the experience and what worked, what could be done differently in the future. And tomorrow I will be meeting with a party who's concerned about posted no parking and some of the impacts that can occur with road closures or changing the pattern of travel. So we'll do our very best to both think through how we can be better at what we perform as our city work, and also work with partners such as the rodeo committee and the chamber on the types of arrangements that kind of create the best of all circumstances for the special events. Also wanted to let council know that Guillermo, CS, and I have both been contacted by the county and the Imperial Public Works Department and COLAB on the topic of North 8th Street. There is a portion of 8th Street that we're in the process of clearly identifying that's outside of city right-of-way. So county right-of-way, a portion of which is in city limits, a portion that is outside of city limits, and some potential interest in transferring the right-of-way to the city of Brawley so a greater portion of 8th Street can be improved that services ag commercial. Guillermo has had some one-on-one time with John Gay. He was also over to meet with me very briefly last week as we were trying to push out agenda items. And as a heads up, COLAB has requested that a meeting be held early next week on topic. We originally looked at, was there any way for a piggyback additional scope of work to take on a bigger portion of the North 8th Street project? But because of its close proximity, the segment's close proximity to Caltrans right away, it would require a Caltrans encroachment permit, which would, from a timing point of view, be impossible to accommodate. The only reason I bring it up is because COLAB did extend an invite to council members to join this meeting. There's still a lot of details to work out, including whether or not the right-of-way is on the center line or both lanes, what responsibilities we would be assuming long-term for maintenance obligations. The county is open to looking at how to improve that roadway with the end goal of turning it to the city for future responsibility. So there'll be more to come on that topic. If any of you are interested in participating in the meeting, I haven't confirmed yet the proposed time. I think it's Monday afternoon, along with a couple of other options. And if I'm not mistaken, Mayor Nava may have been included on the distribution, and maybe another council member, right? There's a bunch of different proposed locations. If it's 4:30 on Monday, it's in Imperial. If it's Tuesday, it's somewhere else. If anybody's has a burning desire to participate, happy to have you. Please let me know. I'll send out the email tonight so you see all those options. And if not, just know we'll continue to review. Yeah, only two. But there's some technical questions to resolve first, including what is ours and what is theirs, and what makes sense long-term. So there might be more sorting to do before it makes a whole lot of practical sense.
Is this an example of when you try to kind of fast-track things, something of this size where this can, I don't know, was that, I'm not going to call it an oversight, but just something that through the normal course of...
No, I think the appetite for the stakeholders on 8th Street is greater than the segment that is the city of Brawley. So, and if there can be, what's kind of interesting about it is it goes city, county, state. So as Kay spent more time trying to understand how do we get this continuous area to the state right away accomplished, the hope was, and there was a couple days of imagining, wouldn't it be awesome if we could just amend the scope of work?
Yeah.
So she had.
Yeah, but it's not possible to accomplish with the encroachment permit process. And as you know, we have already gone out to, we advertised on Monday. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up because I'm sure you'll start hearing some rumblings about the subject matter and whether or not the city is going to be open to receiving long-term maintenance obligations for county right-of-way. Also note that I am working closely with our city engineer. When we look at the calendar for January 2018, at the next meeting, we'll bring to you the question of whether or not, we have a meeting that falls on the 1st of the year. Do you want to roll it to the 2nd, or do you want to not have January 1st as a meeting? We don't have it listed today, so I just want to give you a heads up.
January Day.
Right, obviously it doesn't work for, it's a holiday, it's a problem. But the only reason I bring it up at this juncture is just to kind of get you guys, if you're open to it, December 20th, we have the bid opening for our humongous roadway improvement project. And what we were trying to do was predict from a timing point of view, when is the award scheduled to go to council? There is kind of a rare window to accelerate timetables versus really extend them.
Do that again?
Really extend them. And believe it or not, if the worst case scenario plays out, the project doesn't conclude till July, which doesn't work
That doesn't work.
because of high temperatures. So I will be reaching out to you to see if there's any opportunity after bid opening on the 20th and before the second regularly scheduled meeting date in January, which would be
New Year's Day.
No, so let's say if council said no meeting the first of the year and no meeting at all for the first half of January until the second meeting date, that would give you the 15th. But if we wait till the 15th for the award of contract, I think we're losing some really important time. So it's just planting a seed to let you know. I'm gonna ask if there's any window, and I'll be working with Guillermo on whether or not he can have everything together and ready to roll for an award and a single action
Meeting.
Maybe on the 8th? Is that what you're looking at? We could have a meeting on the 8th. I don't
The
know.
hope
Maybe
was
even
trying to
sooner.
be as early as
Christmas,
possible
maybe even
after
sooner,
bid
as I said.
opening.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
It'll be a great Christmas gift to whoever's awarded the contract.
The week
It's a
after
big-
Christmas.
a big
wouldn't
project.
it? I mean, I don't know what everybody's doing.
Let's do Christmas.
Let's do Christmas. That's a
Date
Sunday.
not known yet, but just wanted to pitch that idea in case you might be open to it. Last but not least, we have the Latigo Ranch update. And I do want to share a couple of items as it relates to this topic. The first and probably most important critical path item is the question of IID undergrounding. I have had an opportunity to follow up with Mike Pacheco. It is unclear at this point whether the funding opportunity can be achieved in any window of time that's consistent with the timetables we have in mind. So I want to let you know that I am conveying that we need to have an answer to that question before moving forward in any manner. Because the condition modification and the development agreement will reflect whatever those circumstances are, and without knowing what IIG's participation would be, we have a set of go-forward issues that still remain unresolved. So that's one thing I want to make sure you're aware. I also had an opportunity to interface with city attorney on the question of the public hearing requirements. I have actually sent it to all of you so you could see his summary on it. There are 2 public hearings that would normally be the course and are recommended as the pathway. And it would be a planning commission public hearing and a city council meeting public hearing. I have forwarded to Bill very late today, so I'm sorry for that, Bill. Marty Coyne, the applicant, was kind enough to furnish documents from a neighboring jurisdiction that consider this alternative of the cash in lieu, security in lieu of a traditional bond. And I'm looking forward to meeting further with Bill and understanding that format versus far more conventional approaches. And at this point, Marty's hope was that we could meet tomorrow and have an emergency meeting of the Council and Planning Commission immediately. At this point, I don't think we're there. And we have some additional items to iron out. He is expressing a timetable that I think is very, very aggressive, and I don't imagine we'll have anywhere near the work done. Most importantly, on the topic of IID. And then if I can add just one more piece to the equation. On your budget memo, you'll see that we reference the CMAQ-funded project for the first leg connection of the rear of Walmart to Latigo Ranch, that small portion. And what you'll see this fiscal year is we're scheduled to complete, and we hope to have to you soon, an award of a contract for engineering services. The engineering component of that, we're hoping to have complete this fiscal year. Next year, we will need to be in the mode of construction. And one of the issues that we came up against as we were working through budget process and hammering final numbers late into the night last night was that the development impact fees, the CMAQ grant requires a local match. The local match we were proposing to be development impact fees. We also have so we have the engineering local match and we have the construction local match. And then in addition to that, our hope is to complete Legion Road improvements. Part of the package that we're actively speaking with the developer interest about is whether or not any additional funds might be available to support any of his regional roadway improvements that are of larger significance than just to the subdivision itself. It appears we're going to be short to complete our CMAQ obligations. So in other words, to pursue the construction portion of that grant, which won't be till next year, so we'll be talking about it next year, we're gonna need to amend a portion.
Yes. It's fiscal year 18-19. So when you're saying next year is next calendar year, right?
Yes, yeah. When we prioritize, because we know Legion Road is extremely important to the council to perform, we bundled SB1 and development impact fees to try to make that project work the full length from Highway 86 to western city limits. We're gonna be short. And our goal would be not to lose out on the chance to provide the local match to the CMAQ project. So we'll be back, bringing those numbers back to you. I just want to make you aware of it. I did share with Mr. Coyne. Also, I think we've tried our best to put together the best financial package we can to support the project, but I'm not sure all the resources are there that he is seeking. They're not on deposit with the city. So that's kind of a preview of where we're headed on that front.
When can we get this, if it's gonna be proposed by him? I know he's under time constraint. I, for one, would like to see it move forward. I don't know all the details yet, but I would like to see it before us sooner than later. So when could we see it?
We need an IID answer. So
Okay.
if he's willing to move forward without an IID
Yeah.
answer and be the responsible party, like the way the conditions of approval are written, he certainly has that option. And all that would be coming forward, I believe, is the development agreement. If his goal is to change the conditions of approval, that's what will require a longer process.
Including the two hearings that were referenced. I mean, because that's clearly not gonna, understanding that, and I think we have understanding that, that's gonna, it's just, there's no way they're gonna be, at least the time frame that is shared, with us, so. But that said, what we're hearing is that this is probably not gonna be before us because of all that. I mean, I know that
Not
he
by
dictates how.
December 15th, right. And that's it for my report.
Okay, so if it can't come before us before December 15th, I know he's under a time constraint. I talked to him recently. What is his viewpoint? What is his timetable? What is he looking to do? How soon?
He wants a decision by December 15th.
Okay. So you're saying to us that we can't have that by December 15th?
And because the district won't.
We won't have an answer on the district. We can't hold a public hearing and
Right.
notice it. Actually, maybe if I could have Gordon, what is the advance notice for public hearing? 10 days for each location?
Yeah,
So planning commission and council.
so 10 days each. That's 20 days.
Is he aware of that?
He returned from a trip out of country today. I had my first contact. He wanted to meet before the council meeting. I was not available to meet because I was focused on the budget. I have offered him a time to meet on Monday.
Okay.
So I'm hoping to land a meeting with him at that time.
Because it just kills more time for him though too, and so it's like, you know.
Thanksgiving, so.
And all the holidays in between.
If he wanted to go with the existing conditions of approval and just a development agreement, there's an opportunity to accelerate. But what he's looking for is significant relief, which takes the form of condition modification and noticing requirements.
Is the planning commission meeting, when is the next scheduled planning commission meeting?
December 6th.
December
Fifth.
5th.
December 5th.
But the notice is already gonna have to go out for that now.
Yeah.
By
What if
next,
we
by
got-
next
What if
Monday.
we worked in reverse, where if he's
Well, actually, it's
looking for
before
that
because
agreement, he
it
comes
has to
before
go
us,
about 3 days
or brings
before.
it to us, and then he
because
can work
the
on
paper takes 3 or 4 days to
relief and all
publish.
those other things in the back
So
end.
2 weeks before.
You know, after
tomorrow.
the fact.
I have explained to him that if he wanted to just accept the responsibility as is, that's an option, but that's not what he's seeking.
I understand that, but I think maybe if, I understand what he's trying to do, you know, and if he doesn't obviously get what he's desiring, I don't think he's gonna move forward, and that puts us back with a broken project there for another 10 years. So, I'm just trying to see if we can help move this forward. And, you know, delaying and then giving us an answer that the 15th of December is not going to be an option for him. I mean, we're just waiting to deliver bad news on Monday is what we're doing.
I have communicated with him today. I don't think it was the news he wanted to receive. He's hoping that I can state all the items that he's requesting you've already approved outside of a public process. And that I have confirmation and validation from IID that they're gonna cover the expense.
That was communicated from him, is what you're saying? Well, and obviously not the case, and I think
Well,
in the
I'm
public
hopeful.
process, yeah, is what we wanted through you is, in writing, whatever is agreed upon, stamped out, brought, you know, obviously in front of us and through the rightful process. On the hearing portion, there's just obviously hearing, I know they're in place because there is no way around that, correct? There are some cases where
Why
things can
couldn't
come
we
back.
have a developer agreement, then have some contingencies? It's contingent upon him getting approval from my idea, contingent upon, you know, getting relief from the
Yeah.
city, those sorts of things. Why is that
So-
not an option?
A development agreement alone is, but he's not seeking a development agreement. He's seeking a condition modification.
I understand, but that could be part of his agreement, is that he's agreeing to these things if this were the case. What I'm trying to get is at least another step forward, because it looks like nothing's moving forward. I mean, at least from my perspective, right? And so the conversations I've had with him and what I'm hearing today is that, you know, considering what he's desiring won't be an option for him, and it won't meet his timeline on December 15th. So at the very least, I want one step forward, even if it is sort of working in reverse, you know, and that's all I'm.
There are significant concerns with his proposals. If council wants us to prioritize the written evaluation of those items, I will try to pivot off a budget and only focus on that to get it to you in the next week. Very, very challenging. I would be pulling Guillermo and Warden off of all their other responsibilities as well. There are some, there's some creativity in the process that I know we hope to accommodate.
Well, I think we need to view how important is this project to everybody here.
It's important.
It's important to me. It's important to me not just because of him, but it's important to me because it's a development. We have somebody who's local. He has a proven track record of making things happen. And I honestly think if we miss an opportunity to have somebody develop that project, it's going to put us in a terrible position. You know?
The dollars that are pledged to it from the city at this point are at $2 million, and they're in excess of what we have available.
Okay.
So that's another piece of a very important puzzle.
That is very important, so we need that ability to have that discussion.
Right, and we haven't had that ability, because we haven't had, I didn't know that until you said it just now, you know?
Exactly.
So it's like, that's what I need more information, I think all of us do.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think we've, you know, that hasn't been shared. Because what I get from him is the frustration, and from me, it's the lack of information. So it's like, I'm not fully equipped to answer or challenge anything that he's saying, you know? So that's.
Happy to send to you. I've written up the situation. I think that maybe it got lost in inbox.
I've seen it, but look, I honestly, look, for me, and maybe I speak for all of council, I don't know, I just need really brief, I don't need a long soliloquy of everything that is transpiring, but just like, hey, this is what he's wanting, super short narrative, this is what we can do, this is what we can't do, and that's it, you know? And at that point, we also, as council members, make a decision if we want to make this a priority or not, you know? At least for, on the surface, it is a priority for me. I want to see this develop, I want to see this improvement, you know? But if there's too much in the way of it, then, and it's virtually impossible to do, then there's a clear understanding on my part, and I can make a argument for that and defend it, you know? But right now, I don't have anything to work with, so I don't know if the rest of the council feels that way, but I do. So, you know?
Well, I just feel that it's an opportunity, and if we miss this opportunity, we may not get another developer that may be interested in developing that area. So we need to do whatever we can to see if we can help make it happen.
Would you like to hear from our department heads that have had some
Sure.
time to at least preliminarily review the requests?
I think right now is not the time. I mean, we can move forward, but at the very least, getting some update on that information, I think, is useful. You know, because right now, we don't have anything. I don't want to beat it a horse, but I certainly do want more information.
Rosanna, I've communicated, obviously, we've been in this very tough budget process. I know there's been a lot of bandwidth there. So with respect to all of that understood, I think we're very close to getting that behind us. So the key here is we've known some of these timelines for quite a while. I want to say months, not weeks. And when I'm saying we, council, whatever, it's just, if we miss the timeline, regardless of the reason, it's all for naught. It doesn't matter what the conditions are, because we won't have a developer. So we're either going to seize this or not, whatever the risk and exposure to the city, that's what we want to know so we can make a good decision. If it's going to cost us right now $2 million plus of what we don't have, that's easy for me to defend. Say, you know, Mr. Coyne, we don't have $2 million plus. Love to help you, you know. Now, if there's a way he can mitigate that, you know. So I don't want to, you know, get into explaining how, just can we make something happen if there's a Hail Mary pass here where we can some way mitigate our risk to move forward in some fashion. So we buy time so he feels reasonable that he can move forward, maybe secure the project. I think it has something to do with an escrow and purchase of the project. And then we can move forward, but not us giving up the farm in any way. I'm not saying that either. So there's got to be a middle ground that we can satisfy with him, get us the time we need, go through the proper diligence, and try to get it done.
All right, so, anything else? City manager's report?
No, sir.
All right, city attorney's report?
I will just wait for closed session.
City clerk's report?
The December 4th meeting, do you still want it at 5 or it's a reorg meeting?
Why don't we talk about that and we'll...
Sure.
And just let you know.
Yeah. Then we'll see
Okay.
what happens. All right. Closed session. Thank you all very much. Let's take a 3-minute break, please, and go into closed session so we can...